Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack
and Sean Chapman.
We are here as always to talk about stuff. This week on the show, we're going to talk about the Zelda DLC. You're going to talk about a Monster Hunter demo.
Yeah, the Monster Hunter World Beta.
Disney bought Fox.
Yes.
Would be weirder the other way around. Oh, and a little movie called Star Wars The Last Jedi came out. You might have heard of it because people are murdering each other over it.
Yeah. It's the yearly ritual we now have every December is that everybody goes to the movie theaters, sees a Star Wars movie, and then there's blood in the streets over it. And it's the life we live until we die, because now Disney's has a whole other fucking whole movie, really, like the studio TV bullshit, like they're owning everything. They own us now.
Star Wars X Fantastic Four, it can happen.
It's going to happen. They're going to run out of ideas eventually.
All right, Sean, spoiler-free reaction. What'd you think of The Last Jedi?
I liked it quite a bit. I think it's easily, for me, brief recap of my thoughts of Episode 7 and Rogue One. Didn't like either of those movies. Episode 7's better than Rogue One, but I didn't really like either of them. Episode 8 is easily the best out of those three. I think it's a really strong movie with a great story, makes really good use of its characters, like great music, great cinematography, all that stuff is great. Like a couple of issues of, I think there's some like setting issues it inherits from Episode 7 that it can't quite fix. And then like overall it's mostly that I think the movie like tries to tackle too much instead of sort of focusing on a couple of things. I think it stuffs itself with a bunch of subplots and a bunch of thematic ideas that it can't see some of them to its resolution in a way that feels really messy to me. And I wish that it was more focused. But other than that, I think it's really strong.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. And I'll say, like, when did you see the movie?
A couple of days ago. Friday.
Yeah. Okay, so we both saw it around the same time. And I was just going to say that, like, you know, I've been thinking about it and going over it in my head. And I definitely thought when I watched it, like, this is a lot of movie. This is maybe too much movie. And I do think it's probably too much. There's one subplot we'll talk about that I think I totally see why they did it, and I think it's well done. The question is whether it coheres.
Yeah.
And the movie has cohered in my mind more and more the more I think about it, even if I do think still, like, I think everything in the movie does come from a central set of themes.
Yes.
It's just about, you know, how much are you going to let that grow? And you could cut it off at different points. That said, the movie's flaws are all like faults of ambition and passion.
Yeah.
And those are much better problems to have than a lot of Star Wars movies by George Lucas and others have had, you know?
Sure, yeah.
So I really, really did like it, and just, there are definitely parts of it that just are kind of jaw-dropping and blow you away, and I will never forget, there's one moment in this movie, not to spoil anything, where the sound kind of goes down for a minute, and most of the people in my theater verbally said the words, "Holy shit."
Yeah.
That's a rare experience.
Yeah, no, it is an excellently made film.
Yeah, no, and just, yeah. So we will talk about that in spoiler detail because you've probably seen it, but who knows? I mean, the numbers don't lie.
It made very slightly less money than The Force Awakens, which means it made almost all the money in the world a movie can make.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of incredible because, like, even if you go back to, like, Empire and Jedi, those made dramatically less than the original Star Wars. Now, for the time, that was still, like, they were making unheard of amounts of money. But it's like, this is, like, almost on par with Force Awakens, so it's still, like, Star Wars is not dropping between movies at all. Yeah. Which it has done in the past. You know, like, Phantom Menace, way higher than either of the prequels. So, kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the less Jar Jar, the less you piss people off.
Yeah. I think it's also just, like, this incestuous media, nostalgia-driven world we live in now. It's just impossible to escape.
Yep. All right. So, Sean, let's do a little bit of housekeeping.
All right.
We have a ton of stuff going on.
Yes.
Because we're almost done with what has easily been the biggest year of this podcast so far. I have to do a final count of how many episodes we've done and everything, but it's the most we've ever done in a year.
Yeah,
it's actually going to average out to more than one a week, which is bizarre.
We are stupid.
We're stupid.
We're very stupid.
Last week we did 3 podcasts, Sean.
Yeah,
Wasn't the plan.
No, we were planning to do 2. Let's be fair. We were only planning to do 2. It ended up being 3.
It ended up being 3, and we were planning to do 2. And one of them was a normal bonus podcast we do each month. So, like, I'm okay with that. We wound up, one of them we recorded over 4 hours, and I've said this to you off the air, we're never doing a 4-hour episode again.
Yeah.
So it became 2 episodes.
Yes.
Is that basically lying? Yes. But
I don't know. I think we're
it's
justified in the split.
Yes, it is. It at least gave you a day to kind of decompress from it. But no, last week we had 3 episodes. Episodes 217 and 218 were our 2-part retrospective of the Stephen Moffat era of Doctor Who, which we have promised for a long time. We did it. I think it was a lot of fun.
Yes, yeah. Necessary work.
Yes.
It was necessary.
And we also did our bonus podcast on the 4th Doctor Who story, City of Death, which was a lot of fun as well. So you should listen to all of those if you're a Doctor Who fan. And I will say that my written version of the Stephen Moffat rankings list for Doctor Who that we did on part 2 of last week's podcast, I have a whole written version of that. It's completely written. And I was planning on publishing it last week, but then we had 3 podcasts instead of 2, and there was just too much stuff on the site. And so I'm holding it back until after Christmas, and I'll put Twice Upon a Time in there, and it'll be a complete top 40 ranking. Rather than publish it twice, I think that's the smarter thing to do.
Yeah.
So I've got it in a holding pattern. I also went back for that article, and it links to every written or podcast review for every episode. There's a small number of episodes, basically from the RTD era, we did not do full reviews of, because we were kids, you know?
Yes, yeah, we were in high school. We were like sophomores and freshmen in high school.
Yeah, so some of those don't have it, but I even found, like, my written review of the 11th Hour, which either was published for a site that no longer exists or was simply never published, and I've put it back on my site, like post-dated to 2010, just as like, this is a weird historical artifact for me, because I was, in 2010, I was a kid. I was a teenager, you know? So anyway, it's got all of that. It's really cool. And that'll be coming the 26th through the 29th. So the day after Christmas through the end of that week, Tuesday through Friday, it'll be in 4 parts because it's a 25-page list. So it's not going up in one piece because that might crash the site.
Yes, yeah. No, so, kind of like that Moffat podcast.
Yes.
It's like, we have to split it up. That was unreasonable.
Yep. Let's see. We're doing 2 podcasts this week. Now, that's because you're going to be out of town soon.
Yes, yeah, for Christmas holiday stuff.
Mm-hmm. And Christmas is coming, so we don't usually record around that anyway. I mean, like, we usually record on Sundays. The next coming Sunday is Christmas Eve. Just not going to work.
Yeah.
And so, rather than, like, hold one of those back for the week of Christmas, which is weird in and of itself, I'm just going to release them both this week. We're going to have one Tuesday, which is what you're listening to now, and one Thursday of this week, so the 21st. What you're listening to today, obviously, is Star Wars and other stuff. And Thursday will be our top 10 video games of the year, which kind of annually tradition is our last episode of the year.
Yeah.
And it will be our last episode this year, unless something crazy happens, like Disney also buys everyone else, and we have to talk. I don't know.
Unless Disney buys this podcast and then says we have to do daily episodes now, or they'll throw us into the salt mines.
I thought you were going to say the Sarlacc pit.
Well, I mean,
they own it now.
It's not, because that would just be killing us. Like, they need to use us for our labor before they dispose of us, Jonathan.
Very good point. All right. No, but I'm really excited to do the top 10 thing.
Yes, no, yeah, I have finished my list. Yep. Basically, there's still a chance of, there's 2 games that I'm mulling in the back of my mind. Maybe I will switch them, but probably my list is done. Yeah. Probably.
Okay. Mine is definitely set in stone for now because I have written the entire, written version of the list, and that'll be up on the site Friday the 22nd, because I want the podcast version out first, as is tradition. If you want to do a written version, you're welcome to put one on the site.
I might. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It helps. I needed to, help clarify, because this is such a dense year. So dense, in fact, that I was working on honorable mentions, and I looked at how many honorable mentions I had, and there were 10, so I just listed them out to 20. It's
fair enough.
With, one sentence on each, so it's very short.
Mine is really different, because I actually didn't play nearly as many games this year as I did last year, but there are 5 games on my list that I played for over 100 hours, and there's 1 game on my list that I played for over 80 hours. So
that's incredible.
It was a deep dive year for me instead of a broad sampling year for me in video games.
I'm very excited to record that one. But yeah, that'll all be coming. So we've got written articles, we've got podcasts. There were 3 from last week you might still be catching up on. So we're going to take a week or 2 off at the end of 2017, but I think we have made up for it.
Yes.
And you know what? If not, you're asking too much, damn it.
You know, it's the season finale for whatever that means for podcasts.
Sean, this is our season 6 finale. We're going into season 7 of this thing next year.
Are we going to split season 7 into 2 weird parts? And the first part we're going to stick around in a way that's not necessary. Then the next part we're going to get a new co-host.
I'm just thinking how, like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, all the Star Trek spin-offs, those are all 7-season shows, and it's weird.
Yeah. No,
Anyway.
I mean, Star Trek, the original series, was only on the air for 3 seasons.
We've beat Star Trek the original
Yeah.
series. We are better.
We will,
kidding.
like next season will be, like, if you were thinking in Doctor Who years, that will be as long as Tom Baker's tenure on Doctor Who, which is as long as all time itself.
Speaking of which,
Yeah.
stuff. I kind of was saying to myself, like, maybe you won't talk about Doctor Who this week, Jonathan, because, you know, there's been a lot, but...
We have to.
Fast forward if you don't want to hear any more Doctor Who shit. Star Wars is coming. Everyone likes... Not everyone likes Star Wars anymore. A lot of people like Star Wars.
Yeah.
You get what I mean. But, Sean, I finished the 3rd Doctor's run, and I started the 4th Doctor's run, and I finished his first season, plus Terror of the Zygons, because it's basically the season 12 finale that aired for some weird reason in season 13.
Yeah.
Holy crap. It's so
Yeah.
good.
Uh-huh.
It's so good.
That shift is so fucking mind-blowing, isn't it? Like, that transition from the 3rd Doctor era to the 4th Doctor era is crazy.
Well, and it's like a really self-aware shift. Like, that's why Terror of the Zygons belongs in Series 12, is because then you bookend with a unit story beginning and end of the season, and you see just how far you've come, and how, like, it is weird to see Nicholas Courtney opposite Tom Baker.
Yeah, and just like the 4th Doctor is offended by the idea of having to be on Earth. Like,
that whole
despises it.
I think it's in part 2 of Terror of the Zygons. Tom Baker's like sitting at a table, like with his head down on the table, just pouting, and he won't talk to anyone. He's like, I don't want to be here. And then, like, he finds out there's a Loch Ness monster out there, and he kind of perks up.
Yeah.
But, like, it's hilarious. And no, you're right. I mean, it makes a confident, amazing shift. That season has fucking both Ark in Space and Genesis of the Daleks. So just 2 all-timers.
Yeah.
Give them that. Robot is great.
Yes, it is.
It's not as good, like, maybe a story as, like, Spearhead from Space, but just as good at introducing that Doctor.
No, absolutely.
I would say.
Yeah, that for the first episode of Robot in particular
it's
has, like, some of the best Tom Baker scenes there are.
He's so funny. He is so funny. But no, that's great. The Sontaran experiment is weird because it's only 2 episodes, but I love it.
Yeah.
It's very good. Somehow the Sontaran makeup also took a hit from the previous season. Don't know how that happened, but it's Doctor Who. Weird things happen. And even the one story that year that doesn't fully work, Revenge of the Cybermen, has great Tom Baker stuff. That's the one where he yells, Harry Sullivan is an imbecile!
Yeah.
That's great. And also is a very interesting episode in what it does. So, like, that whole season is phenomenal. I don't want to give the short shift to the end of the 3rd Doctor's run, because I did see that.
Yeah.
His last season is sort of up and down, but the ups are the Time Warrior and the Monster of Peladon, which is so good. Yeah. Everyone talks about the Curse of Peladon. Monster of Peladon's even better. They're both great. And I wish we had like a full-on Alpha Centauri story in Modern Who, but I'll take what I can get.
Maybe we'll get there. Who knows?
Who knows? Maybe Chris Chibnall is a bigger nerd than we think.
It's entirely likely.
Yeah.
It's very probably likely.
A lot of British people are.
Yeah.
Anyway, so like it's good that his last story, Planet of the Spiders, is very up and down, but it ends on a huge up, I think.
His, like, John Pertwee's last scene is an absolute classic.
It's so... I mean, it's the one Doctor Who regeneration I've ever seen where they just full-on treat it as death.
Yeah.
As in, he starts to say his final line, where there's life, there's... He dies. Yeah. Sarah Jane closes his eyes, and then a monk, Time Lord, comes in and talks about regeneration, and then he turns into Tom Baker. It's really interesting and very well done, and I like that they give John Pertwee an arc in that last story that kind of ties his whole run together and acknowledges that, like, intentional or not, I do think he came a long way as a character, and he also has to confront some of his own personality flaws. It very much in some ways feels kind of like parts of it are the model for how we do regeneration stories now.
Yeah. Definitely compared to the 1st and 2nd Doctor regenerations.
Right. Yeah. Like, obviously there's nothing like the War Games in Modern Who. So, no, it's very interesting. And then you get Robot, and you're just off to the races. And Tom Baker is my new personal hero. He's amazing.
He's so good.
Maybe my new favorite Doctor. I love him so much. Literally everything he does is interesting. Every single thing. A lot of the time it's funny. I think he's easily the funniest Doctor, now that I'm seeing him in his full context. But sometimes, like, Genesis of the Daleks, that ain't a funny story.
No,
that's a dark fucking story, and you really haven't seen Tom Baker go dark yet. And he does it, and it's amazing and heart-wrenching, and just the range he shows in that first year. Oh, good God, I'm like, I only have 6 seasons left, and I'm weirdly sad about that. It's like, that's more than anyone else. but it's like, I want to watch him forever. And then I was researching, Big Finish has done 7 seasons of shows with him.
Yeah.
If I want more, there's more.
Yes, there definitely is.
But yes, no, I'm loving it, Sean. I'm taking a little break right now because I have some other things to watch. And if I don't take a break, I'm just going to be watching Doctor Who all the time.
Yeah.
And some of the things I have to watch are like, I want to go back and watch The 10th Planet before Christmas because it's...
Sure, yeah.
The 10th Planet is going to be a clearly very foundational episode to that. Different, other movies I'm trying to catch up on for awards voting and things like that. So... yeah, but man, I'm loving Doctor Who. And Terror of the Zygons is a good little place to rest for a moment.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah, because Harry's back on Earth and he's gone, and Sarah and the Doctor are back in the TARDIS, and Sarah makes him promise, we're going to go back to London, right, Doctor? And he just smiles, and she's like, yeah, we're not going to London, but this guy's crazy in the best way, so let's go.
Yeah.
I love, Sarah Jane gets jumped into Doctor Who so hard. Like, her first season with the third Doctor is Sontarans, Daleks, a dinosaur invasion, the Planet of the Spiders. Like, it's fucking harsh and bizarre. Like, Jo Grant gets a relatively normal first year on Earth.
Yeah.
Before she goes into space. Nope, not for Sarah Jane. And then her second season is they get sent off into space, and most of that season they don't even have the TARDIS and are being, bonked around space by the whims of fate and Time Lords.
Yes.
So she proves her worth.
No, absolutely. It's a I have been very much on record that is one of, if not the best era in Doctor Who, in my opinion. Like, just in terms of story by story, Tom Baker is unfucking believable as the Doctor, and then the people behind the scenes are so good at writing for him, and you get that energy and that creativity immediately, and it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and you feel like Robert Holmes only has one story credited to him that year. You can feel his presence through all of it. Yeah. Like, I get the feeling he was maybe a little more hands-on as a script editor than some others, like Terrence Dicks. Not to knock them.
Yeah.
Terrence Dicks, you don't have a lot of Doctor Who without him.
Right, yeah.
Saying that. But, just you can tell, it feels like he's inserting his voice into things, and it's a very consistent voice. Like, season 12, especially if you just say, put Terror of the Zygons at the end, one of the best Doctor Who seasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
The third Doctor's first 2 seasons are still way the hell up there, but man, especially because that first fourth Doctor season has a really interesting, different structure where it's all one voyage.
Yeah.
And there's not gaps between them.
Yeah, it feels like they tried doing a little bit of the first Doctor, second Doctor thing of the stories just sort of blend into one another, but in a bit more intentional way than it used to be done.
Also, Ark in Space, man. That's a story.
Yeah.
And
now, do you see why I kind of wanted you to see that more in context than just plucking it out and doing the bonus episode on it?
It's kind of interesting to me that it is talked about on its own as much as it is, because it really does feel like you need the context. Because on the surface, there were a lot of space stories for the third Doctor that are on paper like the Ark in Space. But when you get there and you see it all click together, because space stories in general are not the third Doctor's forte.
Yeah.
And you just see it all come together. It's like, okay, we're in a new era. And also the Ark in Space doesn't end in the same way as some stories. It's part of this larger arc that season.
Yeah.
So, Genesis of the Daleks too. It's a famous one for a reason. Oh my god, it's dark.
Yeah.
Also very profound and interesting.
Yeah.
And Davros.
Davros is such a good character. He's always been such an amazing character.
I think the actor who plays him there is Michael Wisher. That voice haunts my dreams.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Anyway, there's a couple minutes on Doctor Who. I'm loving it. By the time we come back next year, I'll have seen a lot more. So
yeah.
I'm having so much fun, Sean.
I'm looking forward to it. It's finally you are diving into the great bounty of classic Doctor Who. It's been a long time coming.
It's great. If you've never watched it, it's good.
Yeah. I think I've been there.
No, I don't mean you, but
yes. But for our listeners, yes. And there's a great feature maybe you can listen to if you want to be onboarded onto classic Doctor Who and are intimidated by it.
Yeah, because we're doing with these classic podcasts. We've done 5 so far. We're getting into the 5th Doctor next month.
Yes,
lots of fun stuff to come.
Absolutely.
There was Big Finish had a sale. I bought the 5th Doctor audio drama Spare Parts.
Yes,
because I've always heard it's good,
yeah,
and I'm going to listen to that as well. Just do different, because Peter Davison obviously has done about as many Big Finish stories as he did on actual Who.
He's done way more Big Finish stories than actual Doctor Who.
So I also wanted to just get a taste of that, and everyone talks about Spare Parts. So it was 99 cents.
Yeah,
99 pence. Whatever that is.
Sure,
US,
yes.
But you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. Other piece of stuff, Sean, that I wanted to get into. So come back if you didn't want to hear about Doctor Who. This is listed on the outline as Thomas and Jonathan's PlayStation Vita adventures.
Yes, I've engaged with this in some small way on the Twitter.
You did. Okay. So we do. This is a small recurring segment where I have weird tech issues with with obscure video game consoles.
Yes. Yeah.
I've done this with the Wii and the Wii U before.
Yeah. My favorite one is the Wii U one. The Wii U one is just absurd.
But the PlayStation Vita, we praise it. It's a great little system.
Yes.
It's easy to forget if you've used it long enough that it's also a weird and frustrating system.
Yeah, it's old now too. It's
is.
like 5 years old at this point.
Yes. But anyway, so long story that I'm going to try to condense is that I bought a new PlayStation Vita late last year, early this year, whenever that was, because my original model, I had lost the charger for it, and I couldn't charge it, and it was hard to find a new charger online because they're completely out of production. And it was also that was a Vita that I had bought used. It was never in great shape. Not terrible shape, but just the screen had some scratches on it and stuff. Right. And I was just I really like the Vita. I was gonna play Persona 4 again. It's only the Wi-Fi models for the new slim version were down to $100 everywhere. So it's fuck it, I'm gonna get a new one. This one charges over micro USB, a lot easier to use. And I did, and I've enjoyed it, and it's a good little system. Yeah. And all I did was I took my memory card out of the one, popped it into the other, and that's all I had to do. Very, very nice. Until earlier this week, my brother, I'd given him my old Vita and said, you're getting into Persona. If you ever want to play Persona 4, you might have to clean this up and find a charger for it. But here's my old Vita. But easier than me trying to sell it or something.
Right. Yeah.
So I gave it to him, and he finally said, "Yeah, I want to play Persona 4 Golden. Do you have a cartridge?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I have a cartridge. I can lend that to you." And so cool. And we thought this was going to be easy. So he found a charger on eBay or something, charged the system up, still worked, and went to sign into his account, and we realized, there's no way to have multiple accounts on a PlayStation Vita.
Yeah.
That's weird issue number one.
I mean, I can understand with it being a handheld device that you're not expecting it to be shared between people. I can see that.
I guess.
And the way that I would never, it's not a 100 one-to-one comparison, but I would never hand my phone to someone and expect them to be able to sign in their Apple ID and deal with that bullshit. You can with the iPhone, but it's a personal handheld device, so I can kind of see it being overlooked.
I guess Sony's also though. On the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, that system is so just relatively unchanged. They've had it in place forever. It's weird that it's not on the Vita.
Sure.
I'm okay. And also that here's the weirder thing though. You can't just sign out and sign in. Right. That's the weirdest part. If you can't have two at the same time, I get that. You should at least be able to, on your iPhone, you can sign out and sign in and stuff, You can't. You have to literally wipe the device to factory settings to sign into a new account. Yeah. That's bizarre. So we wipe the device to factory settings. He signs in on his PlayStation Network ID, and you have to watch a 2-minute long intro video, which you cannot skip. And we learned this because we wiped this thing 3 or 4 times in the course of doing this. And so finally, it's got his account on there, and I'm okay, well, now he can get his own trophies and do his own saves. Nice. So I give him the cartridge for for Persona 4. He puts it in, and the original PlayStation Vita has no internal memory whatsoever, and you cannot play any game on it without buying a memory card. I forgot that, because the newer Vitas have internal memory. It's not a ton, but it's enough for saves. So that's bizarre.
And the original Vita came with a memory card no matter how you bought it. So it's not like they were selling it without those. Yes, yeah.
Okay, I didn't get one, so...
Well, I mean, you got it used, though.
I guess so, but yeah, that's... did it really but you got a special bundle. I don't know if all of them came
I got
with
one that had that really shitty Call of Duty Black Ops one, but it had a really tiny 1 gigabyte. It had a tiny memory card with it.
Well, anyway, didn't have a memory card. That's annoying. And they basically don't produce memory cards for the PlayStation Vita anymore. So even the smallest denomination, which is 4 gigabytes, was minimum $30. Just for reference, today Amazon had a sale on a 32 gigabyte SD card for $8.
Right.
If you want to know the gap in proprietary media. So now we're well, fuck. He doesn't know how to play. He's going to play Persona 4. So I'm well, I do have a memory card. I have my 16 gig memory card that I got way back in the day on my PS Vita. Maybe I can pop it out and pop it into yours, and you'll have to play on maybe my account. But you can play. Anyway, we go through all this. We put my account back on, put that in, put Persona 4 back in, and then we realize, wait, shit, I have all these saves on here, And if you're going to play it like this, you would have to start on like save number 8 or something, which would
Right.
get a little grating 100 hours into that game.
Yes, because you save a lot. You'd be scrolling down
Yes.
that list a lot. Yeah.
So anyway, I'm like, and now I'm just like, but we think, okay, maybe this is how we're going to do it. Then you had the idea
Yes.
that there is a utility by which you can back up your PlayStation Vita saves and games and everything to your PC or Mac. So I did that, and I put the memory card back in my Vita, plugged it into my computer, backed everything up, took forever. I don't know how the hell it's so slow, like the data connection,
Right.
but it was like 1 gigabyte, 6 minutes left, and I'm like, how? Is this like USB negative 1.0? But anyway, finally finished it, backed it all up. I tested it by putting like a small save back onto the internal memory of my Vita. It worked. So that was nice. I was hoping I could put back my save for Persona 4 Dancing All Night so I could like play a little bit of that. But it counts the saves and DLC and everything together, and you can't break it up.
Yeah,
and
that's
the
right,
DLC
yeah.
was too big for the internal memory, so I'll have to wait to get my memory card back. Gave him my memory card. He wiped it, put his account back on it. Now he can play Persona 4 with his account, get his own trophies, and do his own saves. And I'm not really playing anything on the Vita right now, and I probably won't until Digimon comes out. I might get it on Vita. So anyway, now he's getting to play Persona 4, and he's loving it. He's having a lot of fun. He got very far in a very short amount of time, at least to me. But I guess until you're like in it, like time looks different.
Yes.
But yes.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So anyway, those were our Vita adventures, and that was a hassle.
Yeah, like the main reason why it immediately occurred to me that you could do the backup thing is that like I had to go through a weird process with Vita account stuff because I wanted to be able to play some Japanese games when I was learning Japanese. And so that's where I had that. I guess it would have been a 4 gigabyte, whatever the lowest denomination was, like the default one that came with my Vita. And then I bought a bigger memory card because 4 gigabytes is basically no memory. So I because you can tie the account to the memory card. So like the easiest way to switch between accounts, if I wanted to play my English games or my Japanese games, was literally just like swapping out the memory cards. Otherwise, you have to do the thing of backing up and all of that. So yeah,
Nice.
it is definitely a weird sort of like obtuse system that like it feels like it shows its age in some of that stuff of like not quite knowing, like feeling like it's an older handheld device but also having like more like at the time like modern console features and not quite having bridged the gap there yet.
And Sony also never really gave a shit about it.
Yeah.
And they like that memory card thing that basically was putting a gun in the Vita's mouth and pulling the trigger on day one.
Yeah.
I mean, the Vita was never going to take off with that as a condition, and they weirdly didn't fix it for the Slim. There's just so many weird things about the Vita.
Yeah.
It could have done more. It's still, I wouldn't recommend you go out and buy one today unless you really want to play Persona 4 Golden, which you should. It's great.
Yeah.
But like, it was worth it in its day. It definitely
it's a great like system that had like, especially if you want to play like PS1 classics and PSP games on top of a couple of like Vita games.
Sure.
Like, that's mainly what I used it for.
No, totally. It's definitely like, because it's a few years old now, you look at like the Nintendo Switch, which is so thoroughly like, that's what the Vita wanted to be.
Oh, yeah.
And here it all is. It definitely feels its age more than ever, but been an interesting ride with that thing. Do you have any little pieces of stuff, Sean?
A couple of things of like, one thing I want to mention just because I spent a lot of today and yesterday because I'm now like officially on break from everything and I can just like do whatever the fuck I want to do. I played a lot of Hatsune Miku Project Diva Future Tone. Just an absurd amount of that game.
Nice.
It's so fucking good. It's such a fucking just great, weird little game. And weirdly enough, maybe my favorite thing about it is still that I could go in and watch the music videos and change the costumes for all the characters and make all the characters Hatsune Miku wearing Sonic the Hedgehog pajamas and take pictures, and then those pictures are the loading screen images. It's the best fucking thing that has ever been in any video game ever. I have like 50 just incredible screenshots that I just like... because I have so many of them now that I forget a lot of them, and when it comes up in the cycle on the loading screens, I'm like, oh right, I did take the picture of Hatsune Miku and fake Godzilla waving at the camera. That's a great fucking picture. It puts a smile on my face every single time.
Did I tell you I bought this game?
I saw on Twitter that you did.
Yeah, it was on sale on PSN.
Yeah.
And I went ahead and got it, and it's very good.
It's very fucking
It's a very fun little game. I have not had a ton of time with it, so I'm not going to put it in I'll just talk about it now and won't talk about it in our game section coming up. it was definitely worth the price because there are more songs than I will ever be able to play.
Yeah.
I did the first thing I did once I had the full version was I listened to our podcast segment where you talked about it, found the songs you talked about, played them, and then did the music video with the Sonic the Hedgehog costume. And so I have a bunch of pictures from the Godzilla song with her in the Sonic costume. So those are all of my loading screens, while I wait to learn more about the game.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
another good one to check out that has what I think is legitimately just a great music video. I played it yesterday. I think it's called Starduster. It's either Starduster or Stargazer. I think it's Starduster. And it's this like very slow sort of like sad love song that is, I don't think the lyrics of the song are not about this, but the music video is about it's like Hatsune Miku is this woman living on, I guess, like future Earth, and her husband is this astronaut dude who has gone really far away. And I never saw the movie Interstellar, but I think the plot of this music video is kind of the plot of Interstellar based on, like, having heard about it, of that, like, maybe, I think it's like a father-daughter thing or something in that movie. But he goes really far away in the spaceship, and then, like, he's coming back, and, like, time dilation means that like, everything has changed, and the Hatsune Miku character has sadly passed away. And there's this image of, that, like, there's this wedding ring that they keep on, like, lingering on, and that's how you know that, like, it's the wedding ring that Hatsune Miku has, and the astronaut dude has in his spaceship. And so Hatsune Miku passes away, and there's this great shot of her gravestone with this really beautiful inscription, and a little bowl with the wedding ring left there. And then as the astronaut guy comes in, his spaceship starts, there's a malfunction, it starts breaking up on re-entry, and so he goes and he takes the wedding ring and stuffs it in this little container that has all these like gems or whatever. It looks like the stuff that he went on the mission to get, and he puts it in this like special like black box, and then the thing crashes and it fades to white, and you see an image of him seeing Hatsune Miku's like ghostly image like smiling at him, and then it cuts back to the tombstone with a second part the inscription, and it pans down and you see the bowl, and now it has 2 wedding rings in it. I think the inscription says like their love will last forever, and that's like the whole music video. It's really touching, and like it's a great song. It's one of my favorite songs on the game. I think it might be my favorite song that's not from the previous Hatsune Miku game I played. And so it just has all this great imagery of like Hatsune Miku staring out this window at the like beautiful night sky as the drapes go past her. It's like just a beautiful, beautiful music video. And then you can go into the music video and put her in a Sonic the Hedgehog costume. And then also what I discovered is you can go into the accessories. Like, this is some next level shit, is you can put other stuff on like her face. So you can put like a traditional like no mask on her face and like a demon mask, or like the best one is there's like this, I think they call it the comic mask, and it looks like an angry, like almost like Goku eyes or something, like angry Goku from Dragon Ball Z, like those eyes, and you can put that on Sonic the Hedgehog Miku, and so you can have her like wistfully staring out the window, like thinking about her long lost love who has gone off on his space mission, who she's never going to see again, and with capture all of that, only she's wearing Sonic the Hedgehog and has a funny thing on her face. So it's kind of the best video game.
So we know what your game of the year is now.
It's we're gonna talk about it on that top 10 list
somewhere.
Well, somewhere. Who knows? I'm not gonna spoil that list now.
All right.
I'm just gonna say it's really fucking good, and it is easily the most slept on game this year. Like the fact that the internet never picked up on the stupid fucking shit you can do with this game is one of the biggest disappointments about the internet ever to me. It's ridiculous that nobody caught wind of this ability of taking these fucking screenshots with the absurd shit you can do.
Internet disappointments. It goes the Nazis, Gamergate, and then not picking up on Hatsune Miku Project Eva Future.
Because they should have. It's like the one thing that the internet is actually good for is running a funny joke into the ground, and they didn't even pick up on this joke that since there's like 1,000 music videos in this game, there's so much opportunity. There's so much opportunity. I legitimately get to like express my comedic creativity through playing this game in a way that I wasn't expecting when I bought it.
No, it's very good. The music videos, I think, are the best thing about it, because they're so good that sometimes I get distracted like playing the game, and it's like I'll mess up everything because I'm watching the music video. They're very artfully done. I love that the game feels basically just like an arcade cabinet in your living room. Yeah. With you got infinite quarters and as many Hatsune Miku songs as you want. That's really cool. It's definitely a great game to play for like 5-10 minutes at a time or something, kind of in an arcade style. And then you've got all the silly stuff on top of it you're talking about. The funniest thing about it to me so far, though, is that I started playing this game, and then my brother walked into the room, and he had no idea what Hatsune Miku was, and his jaw just kind of dropped, and he's like, what the hell are you doing? And I got the joy of explaining Hatsune Miku to my brother. And I was like, it's a robot lady who sings. And he's like, what does that mean? And I'm like, okay, well, she's a computer program, and they program songs, and then she sings them, and she's also an anime character. And he's like, the what? And I'm like, okay, let's back up. She's called a Vocaloid. It's like a synthesizer thing. You program it all in there. You got a voice, and she's really popular, and she's recorded hundreds, if not thousands, of songs. And there's concerts, and this is the jump that like is the hardest for people to make.
It's the like, most amazing thing. It's literally the thing that got me into Hatsune Miku. Yes. What you're about to say.
There's like thousands of people in Japan, tens of thousands, who will go to like these concerts where it's just a hologram on stage singing, and they will like go apeshit for it. Yeah. And he's like, what's it? And so finally I just pulled up YouTube and I showed him one of the concert videos, and everyone's got like, you know, a lighter and are like going back and forth, and they're singing along to the song, and there's like real people like jamming out on the guitar.
There's an actual band on stage playing music with actual instruments, and then there's like a glass like cube in the middle that has a fake anime lady projected into it, and she's singing and like waving to the audience and dancing. It's the best fucking thing that has ever happened. It is like we are living in like an okay version of the future, or like a like dystopian version of the future where there's something beautiful in it.
Yes, it's like the nice version of we all turn towards robots.
Exactly.
Because there's nothing sinister about Hatsune Miku.
There's like this earnestness to Miku and the Miku fandom and everything about it that is so beautiful to me. Like there's no drop of cynicism or anything. It's like it's 100%. It's everything. It's just beautiful.
So he finally got it, and my brother, I should say, is like a music composer who knows all about synth systems and stuff. He still didn't quite understand it. And that's how weird and wonderful.
Oh, fucking Thomas should buy a Vocaloid program. They have like a Miku in English, so it's
that's
like
good.
It exists.
Anyway, all right, let's do the news, Sean.
What's going on in the news, Jonathan?
2 pieces of news this week. The first we have fewer details on, but it's really cool. They have announced in Japan a new Dragon Ball movie.
Yes.
For December of 2018, so it's a year away. They announced this pretty early. It will be written once again by Akira Toriyama himself, like the movie Resurrection F. Fukatsu no F.
Yeah.
That's Frieza's Revenge. Never mind. Or is that?
No, that's what it's called.
Okay,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
anyway, Fukushu would be Revenge. Yeah. Anyway, there is Cooler's Revenge. Never mind.
Yeah.
All this stuff.
But
anyway,
not Return of Cooler.
No. But Toriyama did write that one. He helped with the story on Battle of Gods. He's doing some of the story stuff on Super, but he's full on writing this new movie. It is the 20th Dragon Ball movie in the franchise, if you count the 17 DBZ theatrical movies, the 2 new DBZ movies, the 3 Dragon Ball movies, and the 1 Dragon Ball 10th anniversary movie, which came out after DBZ. There's a lot of these.
Yeah.
That count adds up to 19. This will be the 20th film. It's coming out on the anniversary of the first Dragon Ball movie, which came out December 1986. That's Curse of the Blood Rubies. Good little movie there. Yep. So yeah, I think that's pretty fun, pretty exciting. We don't know like who's directing it, necessarily what it's going to be about. There is in the press release a line about that the theme of the movie is the strongest warrior race in the universe, the Saiyans, which is frequently the theme of Dragon Ball.
It has been for a while, yeah.
Yep. I was kind of curious if they did another Dragon Ball movie, if they'd brand it as DBZ, as DB Super, because like the last 2 were just full on branded as Dragon Ball Z. And then Super is its own thing. This one, I guess, is just going to be called Dragon Ball something. They're not announcing it as Z or Super or any of those. But hey, the last 2 movies were great. Super's been great. Yeah. Dragon Ball's good. Akira Toriyama's a genius. I'm totally in for this.
Yes, me too. Dragon Ball is back. It has been for a while. It's great.
And they cut the theatrical release window for Resurrection F down like from Japan to England to like 2 months. Or to England, to America, England also, to like 2 months. So we should be getting it very soon after that December premiere, which is exciting.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yes. I also, like, just thinking about Dragon Ball earlier today, I watched wasn't expecting to watch it all, but it was just interesting enough that I watched like a 15-minute video of Dragon Ball Fighters.
That game looks so good.
There's like a lot of stuff about the story mode that I had not seen before. That game looks fucking amazing.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's going to be one of our obsessions next year.
I think so.
Anyway, same month as Digimon and Monster World and everything else.
I think it's the same day as Monster Hunter World, which
is
disconcerting.
Although here, you know what? Extra piece of news I didn't put out on the outline. They have delayed Ni no Kuni 2, Revenant Kingdom.
That's true.
To March, so we can now play Ni no Kuni 2.
Yes.
Because it was coming out the same day as Digimon. and we're playing Digimon because
Yes.
we have a thing going here.
We, like, morally obligated at this point.
Absolutely.
Ambassadors for that game.
Yes. So anyway, that's cool. But let's get to the week's big news, Sean.
Yeah.
This was not rumored. This was reported that it was in talks. People didn't know if it was actually going to go through. It was off and on.
It was also, like, not clear, I felt like, at first, what the extent of it was going to be.
Very true. But we now have confirmation, big business story this week, that Disney has agreed to buy much of 21st Century Fox in what the Washington Post here describes as a mega merger that will shake the world of entertainment and of media. It is a, let me see if I can find the number here, $52.4 billion deal. Keep in mind this has not gone through yet. This is a big enough entertainment deal that this will have to go through the correct channels in the executive branch in terms of antitrust and stuff like that. Although I can't imagine it wouldn't go through in this climate. But yeah, very interesting. Robert Iger, the chairman and chief executive of Disney, is going to continue on through at least 2021. That was part of the agreement, I guess. They are getting a ton of stuff. There are certain parts of Fox that are not part of the deal. Like, they're not getting Fox News. We're not going to have Mickey Mouse yelling at black people, at least yet.
You know, I mean, we can always go back and rewatch Song of the South if we really want to.
That's very true. Still less racist than Fox News.
Sure, yeah.
All right, so they're not getting that, but they're getting a lot of the other parts of 21st Century Fox. All of the movie division. Sounds like there's been a lot of, because it wasn't in the initial reporting, are they getting Fox Searchlight, which is one of the best parts of Fox for movies? They are, and it sounds like they do want to keep that going, which is great, because that would have been a huge casualty if Fox Searchlight went away. They are also getting many parts of the Fox TV empire. So I don't know if they're getting the Fox network, but they're getting FX and FXX. They're getting a lot of the TV shows. The Simpsons will now be owned by Disney, which... That's the hardest part for me to wrap my head around.
That, and then for me personally, like the X-Files is another weird one to think about.
God, I hadn't thought of that.
That's just a weird mental jump to make.
Yes.
It's like, what?
So they're also getting like a lot of overseas stuff. Like, if you want to know what was the full extent of this appeal to Disney, it's also that Disney doesn't have a ton of overseas media presence compared to some conglomerates. And so they're getting things like the majority of Sky, which is the biggest cable network throughout Europe. Like, that's where Game of Thrones airs in Europe, is on Sky. So just things like that are nuts. So they're going to get all this penetration everywhere. This is one of the biggest stories to happen in the world of entertainment in the 2000s, period. Like, it's easy to joke about and compare this to, like, Disney bought Marvel or Disney bought Lucasfilm.
No.
Nothing like that. Disney buying Marvel or Lucasfilm is a pretty normal thing in the world of entertainment. They got some IP, and those were like $4 billion deals a piece.
Yeah.
This is $52 billion. This is one of the biggest and oldest media companies. Fox is one of like the original film studios, is going to be dissolved under the Disney brand. And I mean, it's always hard to talk about like IP monopolies, because it's a very different thing than like a utility monopoly, which is how we think of it more. Like, your electricity company in your local town is a monopoly and things like that. Or cable companies are monopolies, and we should break them all the fuck up. But anyway, an IP monopoly is a different thing. That said, Disney has, at the very least, an IP oligopoly at this point.
It's absurd.
And it is absurd, yes.
Yeah, it's I find it extremely disconcerting. Like, when the first rumors about this deal was coming out, I was really desperately hoping that it was going to be something like they're consolidating their rights. Like it's like, because Fox had the rights to like some of the rights to episode 4. So it's like, okay, and they had the X-Men and the Fantastic Four that are obviously like Marvel properties overall, but the movie rights deals were made well before Disney bought Marvel. And so like, at first it's like, okay, if that's what this is, if they're like entering some deal where almost like maybe like kind of like what happened with Sony and Spider-Man, something like that, that's fine. Like, who gives a shit? Like, I would prefer, honestly, at some point, I'd like X-Men, whatever. I definitely prefer having Fantastic Four with Marvel Studios, but I do not want fucking Disney owning all of fucking like the movie side of 21st Century Fox. Is like, Disney's now putting out like a third of every movie that's going to come out in America or something like that. It's going to be ridiculous.
Well, and it means we're going to be getting fewer movies overall on some level, because that's just less competition. And Fox, definitely has fallen as a player in the mainstream blockbuster game. Like Disney and WB own that space much more than Fox has in a long time. But Fox is still has been a key player out there, and it probably just means there's less movies that are going to be made. Disney does much less to almost nothing in the area of like smaller adult-driven movies that Fox or Fox Searchlight have funded. Yeah. I'm worried about that side of things going away. Fox is a huge and important television presence, makers of some of the best TV shows of all time. I mean, just The Simpsons and X-Files alone, huge thing. I'm very curious what that does to those shows going forward. X-Files is coming back for another season. Mm-hmm. Simpsons is probably coming towards the end of its life, but we don't know, and I wonder how this affects that. I wonder how this affects home video for one of the biggest film catalogs ever, which is the Fox film catalog. I mean, and Disney is not good about legacy titles. They are just not good about their vault. In fact, they do, I think, a very poor job at putting out what we would call archive movies or things like that. So all of that disturbs me a little bit. But I'm also curious, how much autonomy does the Fox side of things hold? There were reports I saw on Twitter today that there could be up to 10,000 layoffs just because of redundancies. It's going to be at least a year before this goes through, which means that it's going to be a much longer time before we start to know what the overall impact of this is. But don't take it lightly. This is a really, really big story.
Yeah, it's ridiculous to me because some of the other highlights of things they acquired in the acquisition that jumped out to me was also they have now a third stake in Hulu, basically, because Fox had it, and so that's. I'm guessing that Disney is now going to try to be proactive about getting more stock in Hulu and basically owning it.
I think they would be getting proactive about getting rid of Hulu. That's my guess. Yes. I think they want, because Disney is launching their own streaming service. Sure, they've pulled out of their Netflix and Hulu deals, which they had before, or at least they're not gone yet, but they will be soon. And I would guess, and there's a lot of companies that have been gunning for Hulu and just want it dead. I think if Disney owns a third of that and can get more, I could see them getting enough stock to just kill that fucking thing.
Yeah.
Which would be sad because Hulu at this point is actually a pretty interesting video service with some of the best original content like The Handmaid's Tale that no one else would be making right now. Mm-hmm. So it's corporate consolidation in my liberal viewpoint over here and Republican viewpoint of the 1980s, is not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah. No,
I think. So... yeah, competition, if you believe in the principles of capitalism and economics, is supposed to be a good thing. We're losing more of it every day.
Yeah, because there's two sides of it. There's the capitalist idea of competition that's okay, we're going to drive each other to make each other better, and then there's the more the I guess you'd say the socialist paradigm of what the competition would do here is that it prevents any one company from being able to accumulate a significant enough power to then to be a literal monopoly and be controlling, again, an absurd amount of the American movie market. It's going to be ridiculous.
And the global movie market.
Yeah, every year it's going to be probably almost every single of the top 10 grossing movies is going to be Disney at this point, right?
That's almost already true. I mean,
and now it's going to be even more true.
It has just been a foregone conclusion since The Force Awakens that every year Disney will make the most money of any movie studio. It's been true 3 years in a row now. It's obviously going to be true next year because they're going to have Avengers Infinity War and Black Panther and the Han Solo movie and all these other things. This year they had Beauty and the Beast and they have 3 Marvel movies and so it's really insane. And in general, I've said this, I think Disney tends to use their powers for creative good, but it's also a limited slice of creative good. They have a very particular kind of mainstream mass appeal movie they make, and sometimes they're very, very good, and artists can, make a statement within the system, and we're going to talk about that with Star Wars The Last Jedi, which feels a lot more personal than a lot of, big mainstream movies.
Yeah.
But you're going to just get less of that overall with Disney controlling this much of the industry. And, I see all the people excited about, Galactus in Phase 4. Look, they could have gotten all the Marvel and Lucasfilm stuff they wanted for so much less money.
Exactly, yeah.
Fox probably would have handed that over for $2 or $3 billion. Disney getting all of it is a very different thing. And just that they're in a position to be able to do that is incredible,
Yeah, it's unsettling again. It's something just I don't like it. I really don't like that they did this.
Disney owns, as people were pointing out, most of any given person's childhood at this point.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
It's and just because then like the thing you think about is then where do they go next? Like what do they? It's this like horrifying like mega corporation phenomena of they're just going to have to keep on consuming more and more and more companies to grow and grow and grow in the space.
Disney and Apple merge, and they are the new global superpowers.
Yeah, I mean, it is starting to feel like that very like 1980s cyberpunk idea of the 5 mega corporations that rule the planet, and like governments have dissolved because private corporations have taken the place, or like RoboCop is like that as well.
Specifically, actually, what I think of, because it's a recent one, is Parks and Recreation in its final season, which aired in, I think, 2014. Their final season was set 3 years in the future, which was at the time 2017, so the year we live in now.
Yeah.
And a lot of the jokes they made have come true. Not the Nazi Trump stuff, because like that's a fundamentally optimistic show, but
right.
like a lot of just about culture. Like there's a joke running through that whole season of like whenever someone sees a commercial on TV, it's all companies are now consolidated into 3 different companies, and it's like Chipotle, Comcast, Disney is one, and it's just like yeah, they were pretty on the nose with that. We're getting there.
Yep,
we're getting there.
You're definitely getting there.
All right, so Sean, you want to talk about some video games?
Let's talk about some video games.
So, should we go over to Sean's Beta Corner?
Hello and welcome to Sean's Beta Corner. I'm Sean, and here in my Beta Corner, we take a look at all the latest and greatest in the hot world of video game betas. This week on the show, we had to take a break from Sean's Beta Corner last week, because obviously this is a weekly segment. We do this all the time. But last week, we had our crazy stuffed 4-hour, like, fucked up podcast that, like, somehow you roped me into sticking around for that whole thing. So we did.
I just asked you to do it.
I didn't realize quite what I was in for at the time.
That's fair.
So I put off talking about the beta of Monster Hunter World last week, but this week now finally get to talk about the beta for Monster Hunter World by Capcom. Monster Hunter World, for those who do not know, is the latest entry in the Monster Hunter franchise, which is a gigantic, like ridiculously gigantic franchise in Japan, has had limited success over here, and then Monster Hunter World is the game that debuted at the Sony press conference at this year's E3 for release next year in late January. That is finally like a console version of Monster Hunter again. That is something that I've been very interested in this franchise for a while, but it's always been a very handheld thing since, like, I think like the PS2 was the last home console that the Monster Hunter game was on, and then it went to PSP for a long time, and then it went to 3DS, and then they put some of the 3DS games got ported to the Wii U, but like it's not quite the same thing as the game being built from the ground up for a console. So this is, it's on the PS4, and I think the beta might be back up again. Like they ran it for the weekend last weekend. I think it's up again. I'm not sure. And basically, the beta consists of 3 missions of sort of ascending difficulty, that each mission is, you start out in this camp and go out into this, like, sort of like this big open map that has all these different areas, like a big desert area and this sort of like little like weird sort of like vined up forest area where you go under these trees, and I think there's a big mountain you get to go up to, and each different mission has you go and hunt like a different monster for each one, and really they're about like you have to go track down like in a very almost like Witcher 3-esque way of you're like sort of like finding all these little like bits and bops on the ground that start building this trail that you go and find where the monster is, and then the bulk of the mission is you are fighting one monster, and each mission I think has like a time limit of 30 minutes that for the first 2 missions was like whatever, like I beat it well before that. The last mission, it was like kind of close to the deadline of like, oh, this is what Monster Hunter is you have to prepare for this fight, and like really like they are huge, ridiculous, amazing boss battles is really what the game feels structured to be. You could play it co-op, but I just wanted to play it single player because I don't know anyone else who's playing the beta, and I'm not going to play this game with weird random fuckers online. So it's like, no, it is me. I am the Monster Hunter. I will go find these giant monsters and I will slay them, and slay them I did. I've never played a Monster Hunter game before, so I can't comment on how this one is different, but I found the combat is really interesting. It's sort of like Dark Souls in that you have a lot of like lead up time to attacks, and your attacks are really weapon specific, and the beta basically gave you access to what I assume is probably the full range of different weapon types, because it was like 20 weapon types. It was a ridiculous, like a huge number of different weapons you could try through. And I went into like the practice mode and just sort of like messed around with all the weapons before I went in and fought the monsters. But the weapons are incredibly varied. They have really interesting move sets that they all have a number of different sort of attack buttons you can do, and you can sort of chain different combos together. And there are a lot of different interesting little like ways you can chain attacks together that are not immediately obvious. So there's really clearly a massive sort of like skill ceiling on the combat in this game, that there's a lot of nuance to the combat. There's a lot of nuance to finding the different combos and the movesets and knowing when and how to use them with the different monster types, because all the monsters are really detailed. They're gorgeous character models. They are fucking gigantic, and they have a lot of different moves that they can do, and as they get wounded through the fight, their behavior slowly shifts and changes to eventually they start trying to run away, and you have to like try and hunt them down again, which is kind of made me feel bad on a couple of the monsters. It's like, oh, like you're really wounded and you're like slinking away from this fight, and I'm just mercilessly running you down with this gigantic fucking sword made out of bone that I'm like jamming into your tail over and over again to try to like eke out those last health points.
I like animals too much. This might not be for me.
Yeah, but they are, well, like the last monster is like gigantic and scary, and even though he does slink away, it feels like, no, like you put me through some shit. Like this is like I'm not letting you get away with this giant, weird, scary, like Tyrannosaurus Rex looking fucking thing. But yeah, I've never quite played a game like this before. I've never, like, obviously I couldn't engage with the full structure of the game because it was like very much these sort of sectioned off 3 missions. But I got a sense by the time, because I played a couple of them multiple times with different weapon sets, because the way you, like, depending on what weapon you use, it is basically a completely different fight. I definitely got the sense of the loop of going out, tracking down these giant monsters, like figuring out what their attack patterns are, defeating them, like, and then you sort of like carve them up to get, like, it's not like graphic or anything. You just kind of go over and do a weird little animation, and you get different materials like bones and scales and weird things that I assume you take back to town and use to make better weapons and better armor. And that seems to be the loop. And I am like really into that. It feels like if you took some of those really great, like the combat and the structure of the great, like, Witcher 3 monster hunting side quests and really blew that out into its whole own video game, or the reverse side, that's probably where The Witcher 3 got some of its ideas on how to structure a lot of its monster hunting side quests, is how Monster Hunter was structured, and like, how can we like sort of focus that down into a story-based RPG.
But your experience is going to be the same for a whole lot of American players.
Absolutely,
because, yeah. The PS4, obviously, just a bigger audience than it's had before, and a lot of people, weren't playing them the last time they were over here. Even you talk about that they got some Wii U ports. I don't think those even came out over here, so it's did they?
I think one of them at least did. Like, the last couple of Monster Hunter games, like, have been a little sketchy in getting put over here, but I don't know all the details.
So nice. Does this make you want to play the full game?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Okay. I'm definitely, like, it comes out the same day as Dragon Ball FighterZ, and I think I'm probably just going to prioritize Dragon Ball FighterZ first, but I'm definitely going to come like and play this full game.
Those are different enough games that it doesn't feel like they would clash too much.
Yeah, but it's just hard to play multiple games at the same, both because like both of these feel like really technical games in terms of like learning because these 3 missions were not super difficult, but I can definitely see like how like as it gets more and more elaborate. Like another thing about the game is just like technically it's really impressive. It's a gorgeous game. I love the art style. I love the monster designs, but it's not just that the monsters look really cool. The way they inhabit the world is really effective. Like one of the monsters, because a huge part of the game is you having like trying to dodge around and get around the monster's attacks to find an opening to hit them, because they can kill you pretty quickly. And in doing that, I kind of hid behind what I thought was this gigantic like rock structure that there's times like it looked like one of those big tall like red rock structures that are like in Utah and Nevada and those kinds of places in the US, and I was like, there is like, I'm safe on the other side. I played a lot of video games in my life. I'm absolutely safe on the other side of the structure, and that thing just fucking knocked it down, and it broke apart and shattered into pieces and went scattering all over the place. I'm like, oh fuck, video games are like it was one moment of, it's like, oh right, this is not a PS3. Like there aren't a lot of video games that I feel like are like giving me that feeling on the PS4, but this was one of, you could not have done that. Like all my video game playing instincts told me this was an indestructible piece of geometry because of the scale of it, and the monster just knocked it down and kept on attacking me. And that was a really awesome moment. And there were a couple of other ones like that, of the monster sort of climbing up vines and moving around in a way that I did not expect at all, because there's a certain degree of verticality to some of the areas in the map that the monster can take advantage of, that you have to then figure out, okay, how do I get there? Like, what do I do? Because this is a giant monster with, like, wings and claws and shit, and I'm just, like, a little tiny dude with a grappling hook and a big sword, and how do I maneuver around this environment to get to that monster in time to hunt it down before it escapes? And so it's an awesome game. I think if you haven't checked out the beta, I would definitely check it out. And I would really recommend, before you go on one of the monster hunting missions, go into the practice mode and just play around with some of the weapons. You have to go to, like, it's a little bit weird. You have to go to the chest in the practice mode and go to the chest, and that's where the weapons are. You don't pick a loadout when you go in like you do on the main missions for the beta. But go in there, check out, like, all the weapons. You've got, like, a gigantic axe that, like, turns into a big sword. You've got, like, a big sword with a cool sheath that does some shit. The coolest weapon was one that seemed like it was not super useful if you're playing on your own, but is, like, would be a co-op one, was this big, like, club thing that was also a musical instrument that, like, you could smack enemies with it, and as, like, depending on your button inputs, it inputs, like, notes in this musical chart at the top, and then once you put in the right sequence of notes, you press a button, and then your guy plays a little song that does a buff for people around you. And so it's basically like you go in and smack people with a gigantic guitar in a combo sequence that you then get to input as, like, oh, this is going to restore health for my guys, or this is going to make us do more damage, or something like that. It's one of the most creative weapons I've seen in the game at all, and it's really fucking awesome. And it makes me want to play co-op just so I can use that weapon and figure out all the weird different button combinations you can do to do different songs.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a great game. But people should check out that beta for sure.
All right, so this has been Sean's Beta Corner.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time on Sean's Beta Corner when we check out probably actually the beta for Dragon Ball FighterZ, because there's going to be one for that. So sometime in mid-January, we will be back.
Sean's Beta Corner. Da-da-da-da.
So what games have you been playing, Jonathan?
So, I'm still playing Legend of Zelda, but I, quote-unquote, finished the main content of the new DLC, the Champions Ballad, which is one of 2 expansion packs they did this year. You can only buy them together. It's a $20 pass. Totally worth it, by the way. Both of those, to me, are like full $20 DLCs, so I think it's worth the money. But this is the DLC that we had been kind of waiting for. They did the one over the summer called the Master Trials, which I liked everything in it, but it didn't quite, like, touch all parts of the game, so I think it was disappointing to some players, and I totally get that. So the Champions Ballad seemed like the one we were all waiting for, and then out of the blue at the Game Awards, where Legend of Zelda cleaned house, they just announced, hey, it's done, it's out tonight, go play it. And I was very excited. I was coming home from the movie The Disaster Artist, which was good, it's fun. James Franco doing a funny voice,
Cool.
Doesn't have to carve his own arm off in that movie.
You didn't see the deleted scenes.
Exactly. Director's cut.
Yeah.
No. So I came home and I started playing the Champions Ballad, and it is so good. I already, as you guys know, love The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild to death. One of my favorite games, not just of the year, but of all time. And the Champions Ballad is more of everything that made the game good. And I really do mean everything. Kind of self-consciously, because the way the DLC is structured, the main, like, DLC campaign is kind of like a mini version of the main game's, like, story mode.
Right.
Or campaign, which is that you have to go back to the Shrine of Resurrection to start the quest, and you start on the Great Plateau, and it starts with this challenge on the Great Plateau where you have to achieve 4 objectives in 4 shrines, which is how the main game starts as well. And then, once you're done with all of that, it opens up and you have to do something, which I won't spoil exactly here, because it is full of surprises, in each of the 4 kind of main areas of the game, with, the Ruto, and the Zora, and the Gerudos, and the
Gorons.
Gorons. I almost said Debongos or something.
Dodongos?
Dodongos are different.
No,
anyway,
the Dodongos are the enemy.
Yeah. No, that's a joke with my brother and I, because when I was still early playing Legend of Zelda, I called someone the Gabongos, and so he makes fun of me for that all the time. Okay. No, so you have to do something with all 4 of them, and then there's kind of a final thing you have to do. So the structure is very much like that, and along the way it does kind of play like a mini version of the main game. I think the stuff they do on the Great Plateau at the beginning is so much fun. They basically strip you of most of your weapons and powers, and it's like you do the whole thing and it's a one-hit kill, so you have to be very, very careful. There's like a combat challenge for each little area, and then you get a shrine with a really cool puzzle inside. That's the coolest thing about the Champions Ballad to me, and I was not expecting this. It adds 16 new shrines, which is pretty significant. None of them are just combat shrines. They didn't. Yes, that would be really much a ripoff
Yeah.
If they added like 16 and like 10 of them were combat.
The combat shrine pack, the thing you've been waiting for.
Yes. No, they are. One starts as a combat shrine and then has a nice surprise. So like,
cool.
It's specifically like it plays on your like sense of disappointment. It feels like it should that shrine should end with like Aonuma coming out and saying, "I'm sorry."
Yeah, we probably should have like done a bit more with those, huh?
Yeah, no. But anyway, so that's cool. But yeah, 16 new shrines, really, really neat. They are all good. Some of the best shrines in the game. Like, a lot of them are puzzles, but they also expand out to more kind of platforming, challengey kind of things. There's a couple of them that reminded me of the secret dungeon in Final Fantasy 15, where it's a game that's not really built for platforming, but they do it in such a way, and it's so surprising that it's really, really fun. This is kind of like that. There are a couple of those. And some of them are just really, really good puzzles. Some of the ones in the Zora's Domain area are fantastic. So I love what they do with those. To find the shrines in each of the regions, once you're off the Great Plateau, there's some really fun environmental puzzle kind of things, because it's one of the things the base game does sometimes, but the DLC has done even more, where like they give you a picture and you have to use like visual context clues to find the location, and it really just showcases what a good map it is. And it really feels like the whole DLC is a reward for, if you like thoroughly played Breath of the Wild, you're going to get a lot out of this. It definitely feels designed for people who like got all 120 shrines and stuff. Not that like you can't play it if you haven't done that, just it does feel very much rewarding if you've like played a lot of what the game has to offer. So that's neat. Like I said, the shrines are great. And at the end, again, kind of unexpected, there's a whole new Divine Beast. Not quite as long or intricate as the main 4, but also harder and in some ways even more surprising than those, because like they know you've done a certain amount at this point. And it's a very, very cool new Divine Beast, new dungeon. The final boss is amazing, and it definitely made me laugh out loud at a couple points because they do some cool visual stuff with it. I just loved it. Like I said, a little more of everything. There's also a bunch of extra side quests to go find new pieces of armor, some of which are very cool, new equipment. So it's a very good extra slice of Zelda for, like I said, this alone would normally be a solid $20 DLC, but you also get the stuff that came out over the summer. And altogether, I think they've hit the DLC for this game out of the park, because it has definitely extended the life of the game for me, because I've done almost everything the Champions Ballad DLC added, but I'm still every day playing the game a little bit just because I love running around in that world. And also just one of my favorite ways to relax is go find Korok seeds. And now with the Korok mask they added over the summer, it's a little easier to just go around and do that.
Pick up a rock and drop it on that fucker's head.
There are so many more ways to find Koroks than I thought when I first beat the game at like 100 hours, and now I'm at like...
the best way is picking up a rock, and then you just drop it and it lands on their head, and it's like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Stop hiding under rocks, you
No,
bastards.
I have now gotten enough Koroks to completely upgrade all of my armor slots, which you do not need all 900, you need like 450, so I've gotten all of that. And when I cleared all that, I was like, man, those last couple Koroks were hard to find. Maybe I've kind of exhausted what I'm going to find. And then the very next night, I went in and played and found like 20 in 30 minutes, because I just reached an area of the map that was dense with them, and a lot that I had not realized how you did this little environmental puzzle. It's very cool. I love that game. Champions Ballad DLC, very good. I should also say I love the cutscenes they added. You get, with each area like you complete, you get a new, basically, memory, like they did in the base game, centered around one of the champion characters. Those are all really, really fun, really good. All the champions get to do something cool and badass, and that was fun. So yeah, I liked it. Like,
that's nice, because that's something that I kind of wish that the base game had fleshed out more, is those characters, because it kind of felt like the game had to divide its attention between the champions from the past and like their like surrogate in the present, and didn't necessarily, for a lot of them, couldn't spend enough time on either for me.
And I think you'd like this for that reason, because there's actually two things they do. So you get a big cutscene reward at the end, but while you're playing through all the other stuff, if you look in the right places, like they've added a lot of dialogue and stuff to the world of characters talking about that champion. So each one is like this little 1 to 2 hour section of the game where all the narrative stuff is about that character. And my favorite little narrative addition is that in each town, like Gerudo Town or the Zora Domain or any of those, they've added, and they tell you where to go look for it, or one of the characters will, a diary by that character, and you go read it. And it's just a text thing, but it's really nice, and it's like several pages long, and it's just them writing like over the period of months in the game's history where, like, they were asked by Zelda to come be the champion and, like, everything up to kind of when things went to shit in the game's lore. And it's just really fun because their voices are really interesting. Like, you get a little bit more about how Mipha was in love with Link, or that why am I forgetting not the Gerudos, the
Gorons?
Gorons. Why am I forgetting the Gorons?
I don't know.
They're my favorites. Anyway, the Gorons, Daruk is the Goron champion. Daruk, like, one, he's reluctant to write in a notebook, which is funny, but also, like, he just really liked Link and thought they were really good buddies, and that's funny. And, of course, you have Revali, the Ruto champion, who's, very stuck up, and he's got some interesting stuff. So they're all very, very good little pieces of writing. I like the extra cutscenes. It doesn't, like, add a new segment to the story, really, but, Breath of the Wild is not really about a big linear story. It's about tone and character and those sorts of things, and I think it does that exceptionally well. So I liked that element of it a whole hell of a lot.
So is everything that's added, like all the new shrines and stuff and the new Divine Beast and all that, is that all that, like, embedded in the already existing map, or do they add more areas on top of the map?
All on the existing map.
Okay.
Yeah. Obviously, the shrines, when you get in there, are new. The Divine Beast is new. No, they have not added new, like, segments to the map.
Okay, that's interesting. Like, does a Divine Beast give you a big power also, or do you not want to say that?
No, but as you go through, you do get upgrades to your existing powers that allow them to, like, respawn a little faster.
Okay.
And things like that. Yeah, it doesn't, like, fundamentally change how the game is played by the end, but it is just a nice little, like, epilogue to the whole game, I would say.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Like, that sounds like what you would want for DLC from that game.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like the kind of thing that, like, if in a year or two you finally went out and got a Switch or something, and, like, there was a Game of the Year edition of Zelda, this would just be built in there, and you'd play it and kind of be like, wait, that wasn't part of the game?
Right.
Kind of like Lair of the Shadow Broker in Mass Effect 2 or something.
Yeah, just, like, seamlessly fit in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
You'd go a little bit like, why am I having to do all the champion stuff twice? But, like,
Sure.
you'd get it eventually, and it would be fun. So yeah, very cool stuff. And I hope, I think they could do more Breath of the Wild DLC. That would be neat. Although I really do now want to see what they're going to do for Mario Odyssey, because that game seems ripe for DLC.
Yeah, because it just seems like you could just, like, slap new worlds into that overworld map and then.
That would be easy enough. Yeah. You could do $10 for just some new moons in the existing maps. Like, there's all sorts of things you could do with Mario Odyssey. Just more songs for Pauline to sing. I'd buy that. Who knows? Anyway, that's games. Sean, do you want to do the review everyone is waiting for?
Yes, I think it's finally time
to review Mountain Dew Holiday Blast, which is my drink of choice tonight, because they had it at the convenience store, and as it says, it's the ultimate holiday blend, blending Mountain Dew and Mountain Dew Code Red, which makes a red Mountain Dew.
Wait, isn't Mountain Dew and Mountain Dew Code Red already a blend of Mountain Dew and Mountain Dew Code Red?
Yes, it is. It's pretty much Mountain Dew Code Red, slightly diluted.
Yeah, so it's not watered down Mountain Dew Code Red, it's Mountain Dew down.
Yes.
Mountain Dew Code Red.
Yeah, it tastes slightly greener than Code Red. Anyway, that's our advertisement.
Anyways, to move on to the real review that everybody's waiting for, finally we get to talk about Broadchurch Season 3. I watched that on Netflix.
Oh, you did?
It's pretty good.
It's on Netflix now?
Yes, it's on Netflix now.
Okay, I need to watch that.
Yes, it's better than Season 2. Not quite as good as Season 1, but David Tennant's really fucking good, and Olivia Colman is really fucking good. So,
and new Dr. Jodie Whittaker.
Yes, she's very good, and it's weird to watch that show knowing that she's going to become the new Doctor Who, and I cannot get that out of my head whenever she's on screen, but she's great.
Yes.
It's just impossible to put that out of mind for me.
Also, Olivia Colman might be the Doctor one day. Not an impossible thing.
It's entirely possible.
So anyway,
angry, grumpy, Scottish David Tennant is so my thing.
Oh, I love it so much.
It's so good.
If you need more of that, there's the new DuckTales show.
Yes, I think
it's a little less about, like, crime. And,
oh God, there's a scene in Broadchurch Season 3 where David Tennant just fucking lets loose on someone, just like a group of people, and just yells the fuck out of them, and it's a brilliant scene. I want someone to take the dialogue from this rant he has and just put it over DuckTales and Scrooge McDuck.
Maybe I can oblige.
It's very good.
All right, the review people I think actually want.
Yeah.
Sean, we saw Star Wars The Last Jedi.
Oh, that's right, we did, yeah.
And before the movie, did you see the trailer for Battle Angel Alita?
No, but I watched it. I saw it on YouTube, so I have seen
Fuck
it.
that movie! It scares me! That's wrong! That movie is a crime against nature. You don't put anime eyes on a real girl. If you look at the manga for Battle Angel Alita, they're not even that exaggerated.
Yeah, it's a normal, like, very normal manga.
Anime lady.
Yeah, it's I don't... Why?
Why?
Dude, it is like, that's not what we developed this technology for. That's not what you're supposed to do.
Also, I love Christoph Waltz. He does not scream anime adaptation to me.
Yeah, no, that's...
I think forever the only good live-action anime adaptation is the Wachowski sisters now Speed Racer. They got it right, and they didn't put giant anime eyes on everyone, and there's a reason for that. Christina Ricci already has giant anime eyes, so it worked in that movie. But yeah.
Yeah. Although, another thing I saw, the movie I did see a trailer for in front of Star Wars Episode 8 was the new Jurassic Park movie.
Oh god, that's so funny.
That trailer is fucking awful. That is one of the worst trailers I think I've ever seen. Like, that's worse than, like, the Batman v Superman trailers. Like, that makes it look like they had like $500 to shoot this movie, because it is a trailer that has it's a trailer that has 3 scenes in it. If you count like 2 shots of Jeff Goldblum in a courtroom as a scene, it has the opening scene of the 2 main characters like sitting down and bantering or whatever at a cafe, and then the whole rest of this like 2.5-minute trailer is them running down this mountain away from a volcano, and that's the whole trailer. It just keeps on cutting to black to trick you to think that they're showing you anything else, but it just keeps on cutting to the same scene. I think they showed you that whole scene. They just kept on periodically cutting to black in the middle of it and put some Jeff Goldblum dialogue over it.
No.
It's terrible.
That trailer is awful, but I love it. Like, because clearly, like, they have decided, okay, Jurassic World was bad. The Jurassic Park sequels are bad. What can we do to make another Jurassic Park movie? Let's just be stupid. The dinosaurs are loose. There's a volcano going on. And we're just going to have 100 dinosaurs on screen and everyone's running and screaming. Like, are we going to have character moments? No, probably not. That didn't work last time anyway.
Are we going to have a plot? Not according to your trailer, as there isn't one in the trailer. It doesn't even suggest a plot, other than they go to the island with the dinosaurs on it and something bad happens. Which is the plot of all these movies, but you could be slightly more specific.
Here's my prediction. The Last Jedi did similar box office of The Force Awakens. I don't think the Jurassic World sequel is going to do similar box office to Jurassic World.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I did not watch Jurassic World, but my sense, not just from you, obviously don't like it. We've talked about it on the podcast, but generally, I think even the people that enjoyed the movie probably despite the movie has always been the sense I got. So I don't think it inspires a huge amount of confidence in the sequel.
All right, I'm sorry we fucked with you guys for 6 minutes. Let's finally take a breath. Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, by writer-director Rian Johnson, who I would overall say, still not a perfect movie. Most movies aren't. Most Star Wars movies aren't. Yeah, feels like this dude was born to direct a fucking Star Wars movie.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, let's start there. Spoilers from here on out. I don't know when we'll get into the heavy stuff, but I just want to start with, I think the thing I took away from this movie more than anything else was just an overwhelming sense of passion and invention. I think the weakest stretch of the movie is the middle, where I think it just balloons out a little too far. And I like every individual section that's going on. I don't think there's scenes I found bad, I'm not enjoying this. Just scenes where I'm I don't know if this all coheres. Even then, the part that I thought maybe cohered the least was the stuff on the casino planet.
Yeah, definitely.
The casino planet is still an amazing visual invention. It's got, I think, a great look. I love what they do with the music there. I love the acting there. I just think, even at its worst, this movie, Rian Johnson, kind of feels like a kid in a candy shop, but a kid in a candy shop with purpose, goddammit.
Yeah.
It's not just random Jurassic World, where Colin Trevorrow just mashed dinosaurs together for 2 hours and had everyone do a bad performance. There's such meat on its bones in addition to that enthusiasm, and it led to a movie where my jaw was constantly dropped by things we were seeing or moves the movie was making. I think the opening action scene is incredible. This little vignette it almost does, where there's this whole arc for this one character who never even has a line of dialogue before dying. Just an amazing space battle. And I was okay, this is good. But I knew we were in good hands when we cut back to the island where Luke and Rey are. And, we've been waiting 2 years. Rey has the lightsaber extended out. Luke is standing there. Very cool scene from the end of The Force Awakens, but a cock tease. And Luke takes the lightsaber and chucks it over his shoulder.
And just walks away without saying a word.
And I knew we were in good hands. Did you have the same feeling?
Oh, absolutely. Because it's something of, like, there's so much to talk about with this movie. But, like, there's a part of this movie to me as someone who, and I know like we disagree on episode 7, but I really did not like most of episode 7. Like there's bits of that movie that I liked, but overall I did not enjoy that movie. And like specifically, some of the things I really didn't like about that movie were things like that Supreme Commander Snoke character. I didn't like the whole like them trying to set up this stupid mystery about Rey's parents and that like overshadowing like everything about her character in a way that I like couldn't like engage with that character because there's this stupid plot thing hanging over her, like fucking like Clara from Series 7B of Doctor Who or something. It's just like, why are you doing that? That fucking sucks. And there was just stuff like that, and I didn't like that they brought back the Anakin Luke blue lightsaber because it's just like, don't like get away. Like I want you to get away from a lot of this stuff instead of clinging to it desperately to try to convince people that you're making a Star Wars movie. Like make a good movie that does Star Wars shit. And it's a Star Wars movie. And then Episode 7 was not that to me. Rogue One was not that to me. And Luke taking that lightsaber and just throwing it over his shoulders, like I was like, you're making a Star Wars movie. You're finally, it's fucking the third one of these. But to me, this is the first sign that someone's actually making a Star Wars movie. You're paying attention to what like Star Wars movies for like people. Like I think the people put those movies in a box, like even the original trilogy of being like safe and simple and kids movies for like that are just about good and evil and that stuff. It's like there's way more going on there than in those movies than people ever give them credit for. And I think like they make bold, interesting, weird storytelling choices all the fucking time, even in the prequels. Like it doesn't like the prequels are generally bad movies, but they are like weird, interesting movies to me, even if they're bad most of the time. That like you need to be weird and bad and hokey in some ways to even be Star Wars. Like you have to do something stupid and awesome and crazy and weird, and that's what this movie does immediately. And then it also just sort of says like most of that shit that didn't really work for me in The Force Awakens, this movie just like undercuts every single one. It just goes through like a list over the course of this 2.5-hour movie, and like it was like Rian Johnson listened to our podcast and listened to my criticisms of a lot of those things and just said, yeah, that's right. Yeah, like these, like yes, that fucking Rey's plotline, fucking that's stupid. Like let's undercut it and give it a good answer. Like that Snoke character, stupid. Let's undercut that and like use it well.
Let's literally cut it in half.
Yeah, like, and it's not just that I think he throws it away. I think he does kind of throw them away, but it like that's kind of the point of the movie is how he throws it away, and it is an effective piece of storytelling, not just him jettisoning pieces of the last movie.
Because I'll say this, as a fan of The Force Awakens, and I did this as my favorite theater did a double feature, so we watched them back to back. I don't think it disrespects The Force Awakens. Sure. I do think it organically builds because a lot of the things this movie does are things like I was either hoping it would do or I didn't know to hope they would do it. Like I could never have predicted they would kill Snoke halfway through this movie, right? Like even when that scene like is going on, you're like, okay, clearly Kylo Ren is going to try, but I wouldn't expect he'd succeed. And the way he succeeds is, just the way that happens. Like, it's so surprising. But again, it actually, like, in retrospect, you put them together to me, it feels like The Force Awakens is teeing up on the basis of expectations, and The Last Jedi is there to knock that shit over and say, we're trying something new. Yeah. And you can't subvert without building the expectations up.
Sure.
And so on one level, I do understand some of the fan complaints I've seen about, like, I was invested in these fan theories or whatever in Force Awakens, and they're not addressed properly here. Now, I know that's not every fan complaint. I'm not trying to paint too broad a stroke, and I can kind of get that. But for me, like, one, it didn't. I was hoping that Rey's parents weren't anybody. If they are someone that completely undercuts the entire point of the character. And I think the other thing is the Star Wars movies at their best are forward-looking. They're not about the past. And I think, it's very easy now it's 40 years old. New Hope is 40 years old, and the other movies are at least, 34 years old in the original trilogy. And it's easy to look back at them now and say, like, oh yeah, obviously George Lucas had the whole thing planned out, and he just made the movies, and it's like, no. And
because he obviously didn't. Like, and all you need to do is watch fucking Return of the Jedi and get to the part where Leia is suddenly Luke's sister. It's like, this was not built. This was not built up to. This was not planned. Like Darth Vader being Luke's dad was not planned. Like none of that shit was planned.
And
at
yet
all.
there's some of the best moments because it needs to be a fluid, living creation. And that's what's neat. Like, I did see the complaints over the weekend of like, oh, see, Disney did the wrong thing by having different filmmakers and not a grand plan. It's like, no. I think it's cool that they had the courage of the convictions to say JJ's going to make his movie, and then like almost in like the Dadaist game Exquisite Corpse, Rian Johnson is just going to take over and keep going.
Yeah.
And it's why I actually, after seeing it, I think JJ doing episode 9 is the biggest mistake in the world.
Oh God, we'll have a whole segment on that.
Luckily, I think The Last Jedi is enough of its own movie. It doesn't really depend to me on what episode 9 does.
Yeah,
whatever. It could be terrible.
Yeah.
It wouldn't affect episode 8 at all.
The thing I'm really curious about, because I kind of was planning on watching episode 7 again before episode 8, and then it just got close enough to it. I was like, I don't want to go buy this movie. That like maybe I will like it more on a second viewing, but I still don't like it. So it's like it's hard to motivate myself to like buy it for purely academic purposes before watching episode 8. But I am really curious now what it would be like going back and watching episode 7, because my memory of episode 7 is that like the payoff that we get in episode 8, I fucking love it. But it does not feel like what those movies were building up to me. Like that does not feel like where we were going, and that's why I sympathize with the people who really were invested in that mystery part of episode 7, because that's how that movie felt like to me, was that like building up this idea of like secretly, like Rey's parents is just going to have to be a thing, and like Snoke's identity is going to have to be a thing, and like kind of teasing that I do not think it's the fault of the fans for grasping onto that, because I think that's what that movie wanted people to do.
Yes and no. Let me give this is what I was trying to build to.
Okay.
The Force Awakens, and I've seen it 4 times, so I've had a little more experience with it. I think fans talking about all the mysteries is a hugely overblown reading of that movie. I don't think it's nearly as explicit as people remember it to be. And 2, J.J. Abrams is not a guy who gives answers to questions, period. And Film Crit Hulk, who's a writer that I like sometimes, he had a very good piece on this, which is that J.J. Abrams has talked in interviews itself that he likes beginnings, he likes mystery boxes that get people engaged, but he does not write with answers in mind. It's not about where we're going, he's about the moment, and that means that there are some things J.J. does incredibly well, and some things he thinks he falters on a lot, which is why, people like season 1 of Alias and not season 5 of Alias,
right,
or things like that, or that the best TV episode J.J. has ever directed is probably The Lost Pilot, and he didn't stick around past that. You know, he left that to other people. That's what J.J. Abrams does. I think it's a weird choice to have him do any kind of ending, because that's not what he does. But it also means that The Force Awakens, those are little things that are just built into the movie, and they're evocative to like the future, but I think you could take them in any direction. And I felt in the theater last year watching Force Awakens for the first time that like the whole point of Rey's parentage to me has to be we're being set up to think it's someone important, and if it's anything other than they're nobody, to me it's a thematic betrayal. Because that's what's interesting about her in that movie, is that she is coming from nothing and the Force is acting through her, and that's new because the Force in the numbered Star Wars movies is a like blood lineage. And
you have like Yoda and Obi-Wan and Darth. Like you have a lot of Force user characters that are not. Like I think sometimes I get frustrated that people way overstate that part of the movies. To me, that's like not really what those like. It is a feature, and I think it's something that gets like problematic by the time you get to Return of the Jedi and Leia gets thrown into the mix. But it's not a core part of those movies to me.
Okay, but anyway, what I was going to say is just that like. So that's interesting that the way this is continuing is, Kylo Ren is the Skywalker, and he's a bad guy this time, but a very different kind of bad guy. And so to me, all the things it set up could be answered in a million different directions, because I don't think they were set up with specific answers in mind. And to me, what Rian Johnson does is perfectly organic with all of those things, because subversions, 1, can be an organic storytelling method.
Oh, absolutely.
And 2, some of these aren't even subversions. Like, I guess you could call, Rey saying, he says, I know who your parents are, I know who your parents are. It's meant to evoke, like, episode 5, I am your father, and then it's not. It's that they were a nobody. But that still, to me, is an organic continuation of that. So again, I can understand if you were very invested in some of those mysteries in Force Awakens, if you wanted to see Snoke as the big bad or any of that stuff. But to me, this is such a more, interesting continuation of those things. And for me, in what I was most invested in, this took it in the directions I was hoping it might go. So that's kind of my big spiel on that. And it's what's interesting about The Last Jedi also is that it is very clearly not a J.J. Abrams movie because it doesn't leave anything else on the table.
Yeah, no, it basically is over. I mean, obviously there's room to make another movie. Kylo Ren and Rey are still there, and there's still a conflict to be solved technically.
But there's no
it resolves itself.
There's no specific mysteries Rian Johnson leaves on the table. He has a story to tell. He tells it to its end point. And if we want to start talking about narrative structure, one of my favorite things this movie does is, as big as it gets in some parts, it has a very, I think, clever narrative spine, which is that we start with the opening crawl, which tells us the First Order is coming for the Resistance and they're trying to get away. Scene 1 is the Resistance gets off the planet and engages in a tactical retreat. And the entire movie, everything is in some way connected to making that tactical retreat. And then you get to the end of the movie, and the penultimate shot is they get away. And I like that as an overall arcing plot structure. I think it gives it this constant sense of momentum. And if you compare it, for instance, to The Force Awakens, the sloppiest narrative move in that entire movie is that Starkiller Base is the key of the second half of the movie, and we don't even hear about it for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing. So in this movie, the central threat we recognize from the very beginning to the very end. It's something that... I think The Empire Strikes Back does very well, where you start on Hoth, and the rest of the movie is different variations of getting away from the Empire or being in conflict with the Empire.
Yeah.
So there's things like that. And again, I think the movie goes a little too far afield, but even then, the Finn plotline in the middle with Rose, who I really liked as a character, she's cool.
Yeah, me too.
Even that is tied to that main thing. They are trying to assist in the tactical retreat of the Resistance.
Yeah. One thing, though, I did have an issue with that was I did think and this is tied into other issues I have with the setting that is carried over from Episode 7. But there's something about this movie that feels like it wants to be presented really big scale in terms of the conflict and stuff. Not talking about the character arcs and stuff, but the conflict presented is huge and galaxy. It's Star Wars, it's big, it's galaxy spanning, but really, it's really small. There's something about there's an effect to the way this movie presents this battle that it kind of feels like the Resistance and the First Order are both people it's a couple of hundred people on each side. They have 6 ships, and this is the only battle. This is all of them. They're all here, and it's all this one weird little conflict where the Resistance is running away and is barely outpacing the First Order, and then the whole rest of the movie happens around that. And there's something about that makes it feel really small scale in a way that's I don't know, I don't feel is intentional in any way. It's tied to the sense of I have no idea what's going on in the larger galaxy at this point. I have no really real sense of the scale of the First Order, the scale of the Resistance / they start calling them the Rebellion in this movie. So I'm just going to start calling them the Rebellion because that's easier. But it's the First Order and the Rebellion, and everything else is just kind of really ethereal in a way that I don't like. Again, some of that shit is just that Episode 7, I think, did a really bad job at establishing what the status quo of the new universe, of the new galaxy was. And Episode 8 is the middle movie. It's not its job to do that, but it is still saddled with this issue of I kind of don't know what's going on, and this one weird conflict where all of the First Order people, Kylo Ren, Hux, and Snoke, are all in this one tiny fleet, and all the Resistance people or Rebellion people are all in this tiny fleet, except for Rey that is going to go get Luke. And that's everybody's in this one little tiny small scale conflict in a weird way.
It's the kind of thing that I think it makes 100% sense in terms of how you're concentrating a narrative to tell a story.
Yeah.
When you do take it out and consider a larger contextual universe, no, obviously it's kind of gibberishy.
Yeah.
But it's also the movie is so operatic and breathless, and it is basically this goes back to the serialized roots of Star Wars and how it tells its story. Very much I think 4 and 5 have that kind of moment to moment to moment to moment kind of pace.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
well, what I was going to say is that A New Hope also, because of how it starts small in balloons, does give us a very good sense of like how the Empire has its arms, and you kind of know what the world looks like because it doesn't have that same kind of foundation from The Force Awakens. I agree. There's weird things where it's like I can't tell you what the Resistance's or what the First Order's role is in the larger culture of the galaxy at this point. I don't know if they are like a sort of fascist, like if they're like space ISIS is kind of what it seems like.
Because that's what they were set up from the first movie.
We're not even space, like space Al Qaeda is a better.
Yeah, like a weird like terrorist cell or something that's like the Imperial Remnant. That's what it feels like they're supposed to be, but like that's such a weird, complicated setting that then like the movies, like neither episode 7 nor episode 8 feel like interested with dealing with that idea. It just feels like they wanted a new empire and they wanted a new rebellion, but didn't want to do any of the legwork to establish that and make that feel meaningful. And I think that is like I think that's a kind of a smaller issue for the movie on its own. For me as like a Star Wars fan, that's a bigger issue that is like beyond just this movie, of feeling like there's a lot of potential for new Star Wars stuff that is unhinged from like what we know Star Wars to be. In a lot of ways, The Last Jedi feels like trying to push to new stuff, but is still saddled by all these weird concepts. It's like, why do we have to have like an Empire surrogate and a Rebellion surrogate? Like, why can't we update that for something that's more modern or more like something that's different to develop that in the way that like the prequels have? It's the prequels are about a gigantic galaxy spanning like corrupt democracy that is slowly falling into decay to be replaced by fascism. Like that's what the arc of the prequels are. And like I would want something like that, because Star Wars is a huge part of Star Wars that is good about Star Wars is the setting to me.
Yeah, and I think for me, like it works totally well enough within the confines of this 2.5-hour movie. I agree with the larger like structural issues if you then place it as an ongoing series. It doesn't bother me so much within the confines of this movie. I'll say this: if Rian Johnson could work this well within fairly constricted confines here, he gets to make his own trilogy next.
Yeah.
And apparently he gets to do his own thing, and they've written him a blank check. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's like I'm just in this position of where I kind of wish that either The Last Jedi was basically episode 7, like kind of reconfigured this to be the first movie of the new trilogy, or just have given him his own trilogy for the start. Just like we don't need to be saddled with all this old shit. Like I'm super like overjoyed to have Mark Hamill back and Carrie Fisher back and Harrison Ford back, but like as a Star Wars fan, I'm way more interested in getting away from all this stuff because it's so saddled with it.
No, and I get it. It doesn't bother me as much, but I do get it. But let's talk about. There's so many ways you could approach this movie. I want to get into Luke as soon as possible because we should, but I also don't want to overlook, because I mentioned it earlier, how good is that opening space battle sequence?
Yeah, it's really great.
Like it reminded me of like. At the beginning, like, oh, this is kind of like that thing at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, which is my favorite part of that movie, which is that opening space battle. Or one of my, that's got a lot of good stuff in it.
I like the movie.
And this one is like that on crack. And you just see like, I think it was Matt Zollerseitz, the critic, compared the action in this movie to the Genndy Tartakovsky stuff.
Yeah, the Clone Wars,
Totally see that.
Yeah,
like there is a fluidity and just a sense of movement and geography to the action in this movie, and I think it's true throughout. I think this movie has easily the best action sequences of any live-action Star Wars film, but I do think like that first 10-minute sequence from Poe going up and making fun of General Hux, which totally worked for me, I think that's a funny joke, to all the stuff that happens to the end of like where you've got all the bombers and we have Rose Trico's sister, who we don't know who they are yet, and like her kind of like suicide mission to try to get these bombs out. Like it kind of reminded me of to compare to a J.J. Abrams movie, at the beginning of Star Trek 09, where like the best sequence of that movie is that it has this perfect kind of open prologue action sequence. And like, because Star Wars action for me kind of I can run hot and cold on. Like I think Irvin Kershner did it beautifully in Star Wars 5. And George Lucas had a great handle on it in like the trench run of episode 4. And episode 6, I think Richard Marquand, all the stuff on like the Ewok planet is really limp.
Yeah.
And I think then you get to the prequels. Some of it is very limp. Some of it is very good. It sort of depends on the quality of the CGI.
Sure,
You know,
yeah,
The
fair
Force
enough.
Awakens has a great lightsaber battle at the end, but some of the space combat isn't that interesting. Like, you know, those sorts of
Yeah.
things. Like, but this one, I think Rian Johnson, and especially impressive because the biggest budget he's ever worked with before is $30 million. He has a sense of how to do that space combat that I really liked.
Yeah, and it's something that for me, like where I go to compare it is Rogue One, where like for me, Rogue One is a movie that has a whole third act that is just a gigantic action scene that I found to be one of the most boring action scenes I've seen in the movie theater, like this side of the Transformers 2. And
Yeah.
it was just like, it was just messy, and there was like no character focus, there was no flow or movement to the action scenes. It was just a bunch of cool looking shots where things blew up. And that's like, to me, that's not what an action sequence is. Like, all the action sequences in Episode 8, but particularly I think that opening scene is a really good example of, like, we don't even know who, other than Poe, we don't know who, like, this main character, who, like, the Asian woman who's Rose's sister, like, we don't know anything about that character before going into this movie. She has no lines of dialogue. We don't even know her name, but they like focus the combat around her. They create a small arc for that character just in this one action scene, and there's a clarity of movement and of action and of character in that sequence, and a mastery demonstrated of that far excels and outpaces any individual sequence in Rogue One by far to me. And just like, for me, that would be like the comparison I put up of like, this is why like action, like good choreography and direction and action is important. It's not just good effects. It's not just a cool looking shot. There's so much more about how to edit to the movement and cut to characters and create a story with the action. Like, that's what is important, and that's what gets me invested, not just showing cool shit.
Yeah, I actually think comparing this movie to Rogue One is more instructive than comparing it to even The Force Awakens.
Yeah,
because
fair
The
enough,
Force
yeah.
Awakens is like, I think, a very competent like riff on classic Star Wars. The Rogue One is, I think, a really incompetent riff on classic Star Wars.
Sure,
and then
yeah.
The Last Jedi is a new Star Wars movie and a
Yeah.
very well made one. You know,
Yes.
we can agree on that. And like Rogue One, I kind of liked at the time, but was waffling on it. And the more I've thought about it, the less I like it, because the less I remember of it. But also, like, watching The Last Jedi, I think one of the funniest things about The Last Jedi to me is that it does, to a theme, every theme of Rogue One better. Like, Rogue One is about, like, hope and rebellion and all that. The Last Jedi takes all of that and does it in a way that feels organic, and, like, the characters have to prove that. Like, when you get to the end and Mark Hamill has the line about, you know, you will not destroy us here, you have not succeeded, and I will not be the Last Jedi. That is the theme that Rogue One was going for. Or like Leia's lines about, hope being like something you can't see but you feel.
Yeah.
And this movie actualizes it through writing, through character progression, all those things.
And I would argue that those aren't even like the main theme of the movie either. Like,
No.
like it is a theme of the movie, because the movie, I think, like has a couple of like sort of primary themes, but that's not like the one I would talk about.
But do you know what I mean?
If I were to write an essay, that's not the theme I would pick to write about. But you are absolutely right. It does those ideas better than Rogue One did.
And the other thing is that Rogue One, also made by, I think, a very much less proven than Rian Johnson, but a talented visual stylist in Gareth Edwards. And Rogue One intermittently has amazing shots and
Yes,
beautiful visuals, but they don't tie to anything. They're not part of a specific pattern. I don't think the movie has an overall sense of aesthetic. The Last Jedi, pick any shot you think is great in The Last Jedi, and I can tie it back to a theme,
Yes.
a character, the overall plot. Like, what does the color scheme red in this movie tell us? Because it's not random. It's everywhere in this film, and it's visually striking, and it's also thematically and narratively striking. Like, that's one of the other ways I would compare this to Rogue One. Because, like, Force Awakens isn't even really going for that level of visual ambition. I like the visuals of that movie very much. They're very, like, 70s, 80s, earthy, in a way we don't get a lot anymore. This is that, plus, I think, a lot of really smart visual invention.
Yeah,
you know?
definitely.
So anyway, that opening action sequence, just wanted to talk about it because it's so great. But then we get to Ankh-To, is what it's called, the water planet where Luke is living. And I'm not going to go scene by scene, but Sean, let's gush. Luke Skywalker and Rey, Daisy Ridley's great in this.
She's very good,
But how great is Luke Skywalker in this movie?
fucking Mark Hamill he needs to do more movies, because he's so fucking good. And like everything, like we've obviously gushed about him on this podcast all the time, but it's mostly been the context of him as a voice actor because he's a brilliant, incredible voice actor, and that's where his acting talents like really came to fruition. And so like, and I think there's like a whole cabal of people like on the internet that have known for like decades now, since like we were kids, Mark Hamill is gonna knock the fucking shit out of this part. It is going to be amazing. It's going to be the best thing, like, the vast majority of people have ever seen him do. Like, it's going to be fucking amazing, because we know how amazing he is. But, like, most people just don't know that about him. Like, he hasn't done anything like live action in the mainstream for a very long time.
And, you know, in the Star Wars trilogy, he's a kid, you know? And, like, I think he's a brilliant kid. I think he's great in those movies. But he's a kid. Like, it's like... You know, Daniel Radcliffe or Emma Watson in Harry Potter. You know, they have done better stuff since Harry Potter, and that's not a knock against Harry Potter. They were kids, you know, and it's like, and I think especially in Return of the Jedi, which I think is his best performance of the original three.
For sure.
Like, you see him coming into his own as an actor. This is 34 years later. He's just a better actor now, and I think he'd be the first to tell you that.
Oh, yeah.
You know? And so... Like, I don't say this to take anything away from the original trilogy. This is probably the best work he's gotten to do as Luke Skywalker.
Oh, definitely.
Like, yeah.
He just has a presence and a way of moving that is, like, it's just really focused and honed as an actor, and like, his voice. And in particular, what I was really impressed at were, like, certain scenes, like, particularly, I think, the scene when he goes onto the Falcon and sees R2 and has, like, a brief... conversation, I guess, with R2, you know, what a conversation, we're on half the conversation, you know, but like, he has an ability to capture like classic original trilogy Luke Skywalker in brief moments, even though he has changed so much. And I love that they have made the character change and evolve. That's one of the things I did not like about episode 7 was Han Solo felt like a character that was stuck in the same cycle he was always in, which, like, maybe that's appropriate, but it was, like, not that interesting to me. It's way more interesting to see, like, what, like, Leia has grown as a character, and Luke is in a really different place because it's been, like, 30 fucking years. Like, of course he's in a really different place as a person, but it is absolutely identifiable as the same character to me, even in a way that, like, the Harrison Ford Han Solo stuff did not work like that for me, because there's a little bit of, like, Harrison Ford is so iconic as an actor, it's hard to tap into specifically that's Han Solo, as opposed to, like, that's, like, Indiana Jones or another Harrison Ford character. This was, like, there were just moments where it's like, that's fucking Luke Skywalker just said that. Like, very specifically, I'm so used to playing, like Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast on the PC or something, and having, like, fake Luke Skywalker by, like, a Mark Hamill impersonator. And I'm so used to having had that for so long that having the real fucking deal playing an involved, like, adult transformed version of that character is so amazing to me. Like, it's just, it's incredibly gratifying as a Star Wars fan, obviously, like, a big fan of that character, and as a Mark Hamill fan, but then also just for this movie in and of itself. He brings the right kind of, like, weird, crotchety, ornery, old fucking, like, hermit Jedi that Luke was always needed to become.
And it's not just like a repeat of Yoda in episode 5.
Right,
and it's not like, you know, a repeat of Obi-Wan in episode 4. Like, he is his own evolved character. And Mark Hamill has talked about that when he got the script for this movie, he was really scared of it and unsure of it. And I get it, because Rian Johnson doesn't just let the character lie there. And I think, you know, like, the opening, it's every scene. It's not even that, like, there's a brief period where he's just normal and then they challenge him. They are consistently kind of challenging and making you rethink of who Luke Skywalker is, and that's what makes it a great character and performance. You know, from the moment he chucks that lightsaber. Because the Luke we met in episode 6 wouldn't be that irreverent.
No,
you know?
Yeah.
And it's like...
He would probably be like, where the fuck did you get that? How? What? Like... Did you find my hand too while you're at it? Like, that would be kind of nice. Where the fuck did you find this thing?
Yeah, I mean, you know, my brother, when we got out of the movie and we were talking about it, he said, you know, Luke actually wasn't in it that much. And I said, you know, you're right. Like, I hadn't really thought of it. He's not, like, he doesn't overwhelm the movie, and I think that's important. But every scene he's in is so meaty and so good, and not so furthers... You know, like, multiple things. His arc, the narrative of the movie, the thematic arcs of the movie, and the character of Rey, who is tied into all of these things. That, like, every time he's on screen, you know, he and Daisy Ridley and the direction and everything are furthering the story of this film and the themes of this film to such an immense degree. I think it's very gratifying to watch.
Yeah. It's just he's got that fucking great beard.
Yep.
He's so fucking good.
So do you want to talk about some of the Luke scenes on the island and all of that?
Yeah. I think that makes sense to like take the subplots kind of one at a time.
Yeah, because for much of the film, it's kind of a triptych, is what I said.
Yeah.
Where you have kind of the Luke and Rey thing going on over here. You have the central thing of Leia and Poe and Laura Dern in the main fleet.
Yeah.
And then you have kind of in the third one, Finn and Rose.
Yeah,
on their
that sort of
adventure.
like splits off
Right.
of the Poe Dameron part.
Yeah. And like I said, like all of them to different degrees, and there are points where I think they don't cohere perfectly, although by the end I think it comes together beautifully and operatically. Yeah. But yeah, so taking the Rey part and with Luke, because it is still like, and I do think it's good they foreground it as Rey's story through which we see Luke.
Yeah.
You know? And I like it a lot. And I like that, Rey comes to Luke in such a different position than like Luke came to Yoda once. Because Rey is someone who had a very different kind of test of the Force.
Yeah.
And grew up in some ways similarly, but she didn't, Luke still did have his aunt and uncle who loved him and all this. And so she's a little more lost in the world. And she also meets a Jedi Master who doesn't want to train. And Yoda was weird, but he did fundamentally still want to train Luke Skywalker.
I mean, yeah, they have very different issues of that. Like, Rey desperately wants to become a Jedi and like desperately wants to like find her place in the universe, whereas like Luke, I think, like, kind of wanted to be a Jedi, but it was more that Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda just wanted to sort of cultivate Luke to use him to kill his own dad without Luke knowing it. Like, right. And that was his whole... That's, like, his whole arc in those movies is, like, secretly there's these creepy old men that are, like, training you and specifically, like, grooming you to make you murder your own father in secret while they're lying to you the whole time about who your father is. And then you overcome that and outgrow those manipulative old pieces of shit. And that's, like, kind of his arc. And yeah, Rey is more, like, proactive and really wanting to sort of, like get out here and ask people questions instead of people coming to her and bringing her out.
And so I like kind of, what Daisy Ridley and Mark Hamill get to do together in that I think, each throws certain things into relief about the other character. Like, Rey kind of, you see just how earnest she is through Luke being so kind of nihilistic at this point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's talk about that. I love the whole design of that island. Like, I think they flesh it out as a little world so well. Like, I remember on our Force Awakens podcast, you said that place didn't look Star Wars-y to you.
Yeah.
And I felt like, and I didn't necessarily agree, but watching how Rian Johnson treats it here, I thought it eventually felt very Star Wars-y.
Yeah, I think specifically is with Episode 7, it's like that helicopter shot, just doesn't look right to me. Like, it doesn't fit, I think, like, stylistically, it doesn't look like Star Wars. And then, like, with the setting, there's not enough done. Like, there's not a little alien doodad somewhere to, like, this is Star Wars. Here, I think it is both how it is filmed, and then they do fill it with, like, architecture that feels Star Wars, and then little weird alien people and all that stuff.
And the porgs. And
yes, yeah.
So, I mean, I love that sequence where Rey... There's a long stretch of this movie where... Luke won't even talk to Rey, and she just keeps following him around, which I love. That, feels like a million different, Japanese movies or something, where the student has to, pester the master, and we see Luke doing his daily routine, and he goes and milks the weird alien thing.
And drinks it, and it's just, and that was another moment where I'm like, they are doing this the right way, that, Luke is not... He's not just a hermit. He's really a hermit. He's been on this planet for a long time, and has cultivated for himself a whole ecosystem that he can take advantage of to survive, and it doesn't matter to him what it looks like on the outside. Who gives a shit? I'm gonna drink this weird thing's purple milk because that's the only thing there is to drink. He's surrounded by presumably an ocean. Can't drink that. Where are you gonna drink rainwater in this weird milk? That's all you've got.
And so by the time, there's a lot of funny stuff early on, but by the time he finally kind of has a heart-to-heart with Rey, and he has the line about how the Jedi need to end, I came here to die. Yeah. And he says that line, and because you've had that build-up, it feels so lived in and real, okay, Luke Skywalker believes that. That's not just something someone wrote to be cool,
Yeah.
So you have all that. Speaking of the monsters and stuff, Rian Johnson's character design work of like weird aliens, on point.
Yes.
On point.
They're very Star Wars.
It's one of my favorite things about the prequels is the amount of cool designs we get.
Yeah.
This one actually feels way more indebted to the prequels than the original trilogy to me in how it designs aliens.
Oh yeah, definitely that part for sure. And because the original trilogy, a lot of that was just like having old suits in like the studio lot that they were working at the time. Just be like, well, we'll just throw this on, and then there you go.
That's something I want to talk about. That Rian Johnson does not seem nearly as allergic to the prequels as some other directors.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a huge part of this movie, but there are several references that are substantial in terms of like the prequels happened and they matter. And
I think like a lot of Luke's character arc doesn't make sense unless you like fairly understand like what the prequels are telling you about. Like the Jedi Order were fucking corrupt. Like they were bad. Luke is not wrong. Like and also I think that's true of the original trilogy as well. Again, the two real deal only actual Jedi you meet in the original trilogy, because there are 3 like good quote unquote like Force using characters, and one of them is a kid that was born after the Jedi Order was destroyed. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda are evil, manipulative, old pieces of shit that are cultivating a young boy who doesn't know any better to kill his dad without telling him that. Like, that is literally what the plot of those movies are.
Okay, well, while we're on this, we'll get back to the cool creatures later, because they're all over this movie.
Yeah.
But let's go on that, because there is that whole conversation where he brings her into the library, and they have this talk. It's like, because he says he's going to give her 3 lessons, and this is lesson 1. And I did definitely get a buzz off, like, I'm glad that they recognize the prequels, and he talks about them, and it's very clearly canonized here. But also, I completely agree with what you say. I think this movie is not just in conversation with the text of the other Star Wars movies, but is critiquing them in the way you were just saying. Because, like, that's not an overt part of the text that Yoda and Obi-Wan are being manipulative. Yeah. But if you break it down in the larger context, you're right. That is totally a part of it, and it feels like Rian Johnson isn't just idolizing Star Wars, he's questioning it. And I think that's something I've seen a lot of debate about online so far, but it's something I loved about this movie.
Yeah, like, I think, like, that is what Star Wars is to me. Because I think, like, you're right, it's not part of, like, the in-your-face text of Episode 5 and Episode 6, which are the 2 movies that really deal with that, obviously, because Episode 4 wasn't planning to be a big series yet. But, like, it's not part of, like, the in-your-face text, but I think it is absolutely what those movies are doing. Like, that is, you have the whole scene where Obi-Wan sits Luke down and says, like, well, it is true from a certain point of view. And in response to Luke being like, why didn't you tell me that Darth Vader was my father? You told me that he killed my father. That's why I've been trying to go kill Darth Vader the whole time. And his answer to that is, well, your father was dead. That is true from a certain point of view. Like, that's not a fucking answer to that question. Like, that's not fair. And then another thing is, like, Yoda in Episode 5, the plot of that movie is that Yoda wants Luke to let his friends die so Luke can finish his training and then go kill specifically kill Darth Vader. There's no talk of we'll convert anybody, we'll bring anybody to the light side of the Force. They are specifically, you are going to go kill Darth Vader, and you have to let your friends die to do that. And Luke says, no, I'm going to go save my friends. And Luke makes the right choice. Disobeying Yoda was the right thing to do in that scenario.
It's one of the things that's so smart about this script for The Last Jedi is that where it chooses to echo old Star Wars movies, it does it in a progressive way.
Yes.
So, like, when Rey makes the same choice to abandon Luke here, it doesn't play as just an echo of him abandoning Yoda. It's the same thing, and it's what Yoda says later in this movie, that the student has to surpass the master. That's our role, is to be surpassed. And so Luke makes the same mistakes Yoda did, and Rey has to make the same kind of choice Luke did, and what Rey does is ultimately the right thing.
Yeah.
Because, I think there's another thing like that I want to talk about with how people are treating like the moment of choice with what Kylo Ren does to Snoke and some of that stuff.
Yeah, we'll definitely get there.
Where I think there's a lot of this movie about kind of hope versus nihilism. And, Luke has fallen into this deep pit of kind of feeling like, no, it all just has to die. And you completely understand why he's there. He's not wrong about what he says, although we come to learn that maybe he's drawn the wrong conclusions from it, that you can be out there active in the world while still challenging it.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about. And it's kind of the same choice that Luke had to make with Yoda, is being proactive and finding a better way forward. And old people in this world, in our world, can't always see that way forward. It takes the, brashness of youth to see it.
Yeah.
And that's what Rey winds up doing here when Luke just has no answers for her. Just like, Yoda really didn't have the right answers for Luke in that moment.
Yeah.
And, we know Luke went on in Return of the Jedi to find the right way to deal with Vader and to do the best thing, and it's something his masters could never foresee, just as Rey, I think, makes the right choices here in something that Luke could never foresee.
Yeah.
And so all of that, those are really interesting echoes of Star Wars past and progressions of that, and comparing again to Force Awakens, like, Force Awakens has lots and lots of echoes. It doesn't ever take that extra step, I think.
Yeah.
So would you agree with that kind of analysis here?
Absolutely, yeah. Because I think there is, there is a very cynical way you could, look at the structure of this movie and kind of say it's sort of like Episode 5 with, the end of Episode 6 jammed, in the, last third, and then it ends with the Battle of Hoth. You can definitely chop up the original trilogy and find a lot of equivalent sequences. But I agree with you that it is not like the Force Awakens New Hope thing where it felt like you just took the skeleton of this old movie and put a new movie on top of it, and but without really, to me, understanding what made that skeleton work in the original movie, and you need to do things, and you need to comment on it more, sort of in a more in-depth and, I just say, kind of forward-looking way. This movie feels like it is pulling a lot of material from the original trilogy and some stuff from the prequels, but is using it in a new way and is pushing it forward with new characters that are distinct and feel different from the characters that we saw in the original trilogy. Rey is not just Luke.
Yeah, and it uses it to build new themes.
Yes.
There's every character in this movie in one way or another, every prime character, at least of the new cast, and Luke to a certain extent too, has to look death and nihilism in the face and then say no. Rey has to do it multiple times with Luke and then with Kylo Ren, and Finn has to do it at the end with his suicide run, and Poe has to do it in realizing that he's a brash flyboy and all these things. And there's things like that and I like that, it does use some remixing of Star Wars history to get us to that point, but it's not using it to make an existing point, and it's drawing our attention to new things. And getting back to the whole Luke discussion, Luke is allowed to make mistakes here.
Yes.
And that's one of the best things about it, is that, again, nothing he says about the Jedi is necessarily wrong, but he has clearly shut himself off in the wrong way,
Yeah.
And completely shutting himself off from the Force. That's never what Luke Skywalker should have done, but you believe he'd do it in this scenario.
Yeah.
And the whole backstory it builds for him and Kylo Ren, I love. And I love that it's not that Luke did something evil, and it's not that Kylo Ren did something evil in that moment. It's that something really complicated and hard happened, and they both made mistakes.
Yeah.
And it's very human. And I even love that we have 3 tellings of it. We have Luke's sanitized telling, we have Kylo Ren's subjective POV of it, and then we have Luke very vulnerably telling what happened.
Yeah.
And that progression I find very interesting and emotional. And I know we haven't talked about it yet, and we'll get to it later, but I love how it all intercuts with the way they do the Force conversations between Rey and Kylo Ren on the island.
Yeah.
It's not even a special effect. It's literally just good editing and acting.
Yeah.
But it's very, very well done. And having that kind of in the ether while we're watching Luke is really interesting to me.
Yeah. Because another, sort of connected to that is one of the main... Because to me, the main stuff in this movie of that I pulled from it in terms of themes is... And it's sort of... Star Wars has always been about generations in some way, but this one feels way more directly. And I think that was the most interesting stuff about Episode 7 was talking about the difference in generations and these new characters having to navigate this world defined by the characters that we know from the original trilogy. And that's what really makes a difference, is that we had this whole original trilogy, and the audience's relationship to that trilogy is what informs those themes. I think those ideas were in Episode 7, but for me they didn't execute on it effectively enough. Episode 8 basically has a lot of those same ideas, but executes it on a really interesting, sophisticated level. Of that, there is no just it's not just that the young people are right or the old people are right. It's that the relationship that we have with our elders, and then for the elders, the relationship you have with your proteges is complicated. That teacher-student relationship, that mentor-trainee relationship, that parent-child relationship. Those relationships are complicated, and no one person is generally right in how to bring things forward, and that both parties are going to make mistakes because there are these generational differences that you cannot just sort of bridge easily. I think that's one of the things that I think that's one of the things that the casino part of the movie is a little bit messy for me, because that part doesn't really touch on that at all, whereas the Poe stuff and the Rey stuff and the Kylo Ren stuff all touch on that really heavily.
I agree, and it's not that the casino stuff is completely thematically disconnected. It's connected to a lot of other themes.
Yeah.
But if you're like paring it down to what's our most central thematic spine, you're right. That's where it gets the furthest afield.
Yeah.
You know. But this all climaxes on the Ankh-To material with, Rey and Luke have this fight. I loved that moment where, like, it comes into basically open conflict, and they're fighting with, like, the sticks and everything, and then she gets the lightsaber and all that, and Luke has that great line that was in the trailers of, "This is not going to go the way you think." He's so good in that moment. Because, like, they never go fully on into, like, evil Luke Skywalker or anything, which I wouldn't want them to. That would break my heart. But they do let him just get dark and gnarly in some of those moments.
Yeah. And like, he's not wrong when he tells her that either. Like, I think that Rey does need to leave, but it does not in any way go the way that she thinks it's going to go.
Just as with Luke in Episode 5, like, Yoda is, I think, wrong in a general sense of not wanting to help Luke. Luke is not aware of what he's in for.
Yeah.
That ends with him getting his hand cut off, lest we forget.
But it also ends with him learning the truth that
Yes.
Yoda did not want him to know.
Yes, no. So it is a necessary step forward, as with Rey here. But then we get, kind of the one scene with Luke on his own, is he goes to burn the Jedi, like symbolically, the whole Jedi Order down by burning down that tree. And I was surprised to see Mr. Yoda there.
Yeah,
I was even more surprised. I think he's a puppet.
No, he absolutely is. He's 100% a puppet.
One, he's a puppet, which I fucking love.
Yeah.
And two, Frank Oz is doing him like he did him in Episode 5.
Yeah.
It's easy to forget because Frank Oz did it pretty differently in the prequels, but Yoda in Episode 5 sounds a lot more like Fozzie Bear. And I'm not saying that to be funny. It is more like, because that's what Frank Oz was doing on TV at the time. It sounds like Fozzie Bear. He sounds like Fozzie Bear here.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
Yeah, it does. It feels like a direct continuation of that character, because it's always like, I'm a huge fan of Yoda in the prequel stuff, and I like him in the Clone Wars cartoon in particular. And I like that, like, one of the things about Yoda is that he used to be, like, more militant, and like he was like, because he was the head of the Jedi Order, and he's partially responsible for everything that happens because he was blind to the manipulations of the Sith and all that stuff. And so it does, like, I think like his character feeling really different in the prequels is a like intentional thing that I like, that like Rian Johnson and everyone were canny enough to say, like, no, like, we need to make sure that this is contiguous with the last time chronologically we saw Yoda, which was like that brief scene at the beginning of Return of the Jedi when he dies, but mostly like his stuff in Empire Strikes Back. And yeah, he's like weird and goofy and telling jokes, and like he's let go of all that, like being the head of the Jedi Order, because the Jedi Order doesn't exist anymore, and he just gets to be that kind of like hermit monk character that gets to be weird and kind of goofy.
Yeah, no, it's such a great scene because it would be so easy to just bring Yoda back and have it be kind of an empty callback. And it's not. It's a really key thematic scene.
Yeah.
And one, I love that Yoda and Luke there don't feel like Yoda and Luke in Episode 5. They feel much more like equals, where Yoda has more wisdom because he's dead at this point, but they're old men together. And it calls back to their past, but in a way that feels like so much time has passed for them. Like, I love Yoda's line about, Master Skywalker still looking towards the horizon, never looking at the present, and like still coming back to those fundamental Luke Skywalker things.
Yeah.
He has the whole line about like, it is the role of the Master to be surpassed, and that, failure is how we learn, and all that. And just because that scene in many ways is kind of the denouement of the movie, just earlier than you would expect.
Yeah.
And it's just I think a beautiful, beautiful scene.
Yeah, it might be my favorite scene in the movie, because one of the other like smaller criticisms, but is a criticism I have of the movie, is I think it is like a lot of people are describing the movie as breathless, which I agree, and I think it's like too breathless in a lot of moments of like, that's one of the overstuffed things of like, I really desperately wanted this movie to slow down and like spend a moment on something, and like a quiet, and like some more quiet moments, and that like scene is the epitome of that, of like you did that, like, and it's beautiful and it's really effective. I think a couple of more like quieter the scenes with a little bit more thoughtful dialogue in some places would have worked like for the pacing a lot better, because like this scene is so crucial and beautiful and poignant and brings back your memories of classic Star Wars, but is not in a cloying fan servicey kind of way. It is like pertinent and direct to the themes and feels natural, like feels like it has to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of those scenes that like if you told me it was made by the same creative team in like the late 80s or something,
Yeah.
and somehow they just like put old age makeup on Mark Hamill or something, like you'd believe it. It's so perfect.
Yeah, or they like just dug up an old like discarded script from, or like page from the Empire Strikes Back script, and just like I'm like, here we go, like this is like our Yoda dialogue.
It's so great. So okay, let's talk about Rey through some of this.
Okay, yeah.
As well. We'll get to Luke's last scene later, because it's the end of the movie and it all comes together, and he does the most badass thing in the history of Star Wars.
Yes.
Twice.
Yeah.
We'll get to it. Anyway, he does the most badass thing and then he one-ups himself. Anyway, so I do, it's easy to, like, in discussion be overshadowed by Luke, to get overshadowed by Luke because he's Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
I love Daisy Ridley in this. I loved her in The Force Awakens. I think she's a great, character and has so much presence on screen. And I love how she plays this inner turmoil she's going through while on that island, and that the thing she's being pulled by being Kylo Ren. And it allows, Adam Driver to have a presence in that part of the movie when, his actual role, like with the other First Order people, is just they're on a ship at that point.
Yeah.
So he gets a role in the movie. They don't have to be physically on screen together. They find, I think, a very elegant way of them having scenes together. Again, not a special effect, just good editing and acting. And I think overall her whole arc in this film is very compelling.
Yeah, like I think because that's one of the things I didn't like about Episode 7 was that I thought like the ideas for the characters and like the performances were really good, but like the actual sort of like how the characters were woven into the narrative and their character arcs fell flat for me in the way that like it kind of felt like a lot of them just didn't have much of a character arc. And here, like I really love the Rey character, and I think they found a much better space for her and like really effectively differentiate her from Luke and like make her feel like she's her own protagonist, like not just like Luke in this movie, but Luke from the original trilogy. And she has her own interests and her own driving passions, and especially like getting some of that like weird like parentage stuff like out of like this abstract like meta storytelling space that I felt like was in Episode 7 to get you speculating about bullshit. It's put into like directly more into the text of the movie and in like her character motivations and the drama of the movie, and it's developed over the course of the movie until eventually she gets the answer, and thank God they give the answer in this movie. Don't fucking like hold that off for a whole other movie, and it lets her feel like she gets to be a character instead of being like a plot device, which is what she felt like in the last movie to me.
I'll put it this way. Again, I don't think The Force Awakens like beckons out to the parent stuff as much as you remember, but that might be the issue, is that it's always just out there. It's like, I'm waiting for my parents. It's not like they can't consistently go like, man, Rey, who could your parents be? But I think that often, like for fans and in our culture, if you just leave it hanging, that's worse than actually addressing it for people. Yeah. And that's what this movie does, is it just brings it into the text and lets it be like, she is a character who is very unmoored from the world around her, in that she's a good person at heart, and she wants to do good, and she wants to know like why she is the way she is and where these powers come from, and she wants to understand the larger world. And part of that is also this sense of abandonment, and that, even when she gets to Luke Skywalker, she thinks this is going to be a father figure, and he's not. Like, aggressively, he is not. And Kylo Ren, through the movie, becomes kind of like a brother figure to her. And it's this really interesting thing because he understands her seemingly much better than Luke does throughout that whole section, and I think that's a really interesting character dynamic. Yeah. I also love the scene where she goes down in the cave and Rian Johnson just gives us an LSD trip for a couple minutes. Yeah. That was good.
Yeah, like that, the whole sequence of the, I get, because again, like, it's something of where it feels like you're sort of referencing things from Empire, of Luke going into the cave and confronting this vision of himself as Darth Vader, and that was sort of like his fear, but for like Rey's fear is that like,
there's nothing at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly. That like the answer is nothing, and it's like you're like, who am I? It's like, you are just you. Like that's all. And that's like, for a lot of people, you'd maybe think that that's just an obvious answer, but for the Rey character, like that's obviously a really scary conclusion to come to, because she desperately, like you said, she's unmoored and she feels vulnerable because she has no anchoring anywhere. She has no real home. Like she's from Jakku, I guess, but like that's also the planet that she was abandoned on, and she basically knows that, but doesn't want to really admit it to herself that that's what's happened. And so the only thing being at the end of this long tunnel, just being herself, is frightening.
Yeah, and the way they tie her to Kylo Ren is interesting, because Kylo, I think, is a great character in this movie as well, and was a great character in the last one too, and they further him here. is a character who's kind of the opposite, where he did have all these connections. He was born from, Han and Leia. He could have had the best family in the world if he wanted, and he's been trying to sever every connection ever since. It's one of the most interesting, I think, thematic things in The Force Awakens is the idea of killing Han Solo is a way for him to further his own character arc, and he feels like he needs to do it to show that he can move forward. He wants to sever those connections. And so you have these two characters paired through the Force in this movie, one who, wants to find connection in the world, and one who is kind of preaching this nihilism of burn it all down and stand on the ashes, Yeah. And I think it's really interesting how her temptation to the dark side, that Kylo Ren offers, is a very different temptation, and to me it's a lot more tangible than the temptations characters sometimes face in Star Wars. Because it's not just the opaque, the dark side, it's this really bleak worldview of those connections are holding you back. And that's a really terrifying thing. And it ties into something I love about how this movie treats the Force itself. There's that beautiful scene where they go sit on top of the rock and Luke teaches Rey about the Force, and I love how he defines it. It's a great piece of writing where it's feel this extreme, feel this extreme. It's that middle. The Force is what's between all of us. It's
the tension between everything. It's because that's the point of the Force, is that it's not a thing. It's energy.
Right.
Energy isn't matter. It is. It's an abstract thing of it's the push and pull between magnets. Yeah. Basically, it's not the magnets, it's the force between them.
Yep. And so I think, what Rey is trying to discover in this movie is something about what the movie is trying to discover about that core thing of the Force that maybe over time and too many movies and things, that we've maybe lost in Star Wars.
I mean, because that's one of the things I really didn't like about Episode 7 was I felt like that movie had no idea what the Force was. And that movie felt like it positioned the Force as a vaguely Judeo-Christian God-like thing that it felt like it had too much direct will. And for me, the Force has to be really enigmatic. It has to... And that's one of the things that, people shit on the midichlorian idea from the Phantom Menace, but I think what a lot of people miss is fair enough because the movie's not great at explaining this concept. But the point of the midichlorians is not that that's where the Force comes from. It's that's what Qui-Gon Jinn believes the Force comes from. That's not fact. He doesn't know that. Most Jedi do not agree with him at all. That's part of the world building. That's part of the setup of that concept. Is that Qui-Gon Jinn is a weird maverick Jedi who believes in these things that most Jedi do not believe in, that's where the Force is.
There's definitely a better version of the prequels that I think would foreground in the text a lot of the criticism of the Jedi Order and make it more apparent, because I think the prequels are doing something interestingly subversive with their own universe. I think they're too afraid at times to admit it. You know what I mean?
It's buried behind a lot of clunky plotting and
bad acting.
Yeah, bad acting and really wooden dialogue. It's always been the ideas of the prequels are fucking fantastic. That's why the Clone Wars cartoon is great.
Yes.
Both of the Clone Wars cartoons are great because it's all the good ideas of the prequels without all the bad execution that the prequel movies had.
And again, The Last Jedi takes a ton of ideas from the prequels, even if it's not quoting them directly. I think the whole, as you're saying, a lot of people are saying, oh, The Last Jedi corrects the idea of the midichlorians because it gives the Force to everyone. In some way, the prequels are about how the Jedi are kind of hoarding the Force. They're telling everyone else, no, it's not for you. And that's part of what brings them down is that arrogance. And that's what Luke is referencing here. Yeah. So... I think The Last Jedi is very conscious of the whole arc of how the Force has been treated in Star Wars.
Absolutely. And I think it's trying to sort of mystify it again, which is what it needs to be. It needs to be I like that different people have different understandings of how the Force works and nobody really knows, because it's one of the things I really love that this movie does in a couple of lines of dialogue that it picks up from the original trilogy is that it calls it the Jedi religion. And it's I think that's important that it is a religion, which is that it's about faith and belief. It's not about hard understanding. It is about this faith and belief in something bigger. And it's the same, I feel think about the Jedi and the Sith and then probably different weird sects of the Jedi as if you put a Catholic and a Lutheran and a Mormon and a Greek Orthodox person all in the same room, and it's and even someone who's Muslim and someone who's Jewish, all those people believe in the same God. They all originate from the same core text. They all believe in the same God. They have a lot of differences about specifics along the way, but they have the same origin point in what they believe. They all come from the same spot, but they all have completely different ideas about how all that shit works. And the Force to me is like that.
Yeah.
Is that like
if I were to do a new kind of Star Wars movie in status quo, I would try to show like, okay, 30 years, 60 years after the Jedi and the Sith are gone, like what other religions have popped up. I would love to see other orders around the... I don't know if you could do that in a movie, but like in a TV series or something, I think that would be very interesting.
What would be interesting is the Clone Wars addresses that. And Star Wars Rebels addresses that there are different factions that like believe in the Force that are not...
As I said, TV is where you would do it, right?
Yeah, it's easier to do it there.
But
before we move on from this point, I want to point out something interesting that you said about with Kylo Ren and Rey and like their difference, is that there's a way to look at what Kylo Ren is seeking of burning down all of his attachments and destroying all of that. That's not just a Sith thing. That's very much the Jedi belief. That's very much the like cut yourself off from like emotional attachments, remove yourself from the world, like live entirely in the present, and like that's one of the reasons why Anakin falls down the dark side is because he wants to have these connections, and everybody in the Jedi are telling him you can't, and so they force him to do it all in secret.
Yeah.
And so I think it's interesting that. Because I'm somebody who I think that Luke is 100% right in this movie, that the Jedi Order should fall into decay and disappear, and like let something new rise from the ashes, and they shouldn't be the Jedi anymore. To the point where I kind of wish that he didn't end the movie saying that like I am not the last Jedi, and sort of symbolically passing that torch to Rey. I think
you can read the line as not like literally like a new Jedi Order as much as like the things I believe in. But
but I kind of want the version of this movie where they straight up say no, there are no more Jedi, because you don't need to be saddled by that legacy and that history and that culture of that. Like the Jedi did a lot of good things, but they did a lot of fucking really bad things too, and you have to move on with something new. And I think it would be interesting to have gone with that. But I think it's interesting to think about that in some ways. Kylo Ren is taking his Jedi teachings and just following them to their extreme.
Let's talk about Kylo Ren.
Yes.
Because I love this guy.
Me too.
I love that he is such a... And The Force Awakens definitely starts a lot of this. And
yes,
I think
he's my favorite part of The Force Awakens for sure.
Because he's a mishmash of all these different Star Wars things. Like, he's not just Darth Vader too. Yeah. He is also, as you say, I think he also is very aware of Jedi history and stuff. And like his idolization of Darth Vader comes from... Not just he's a great Sith, but he was a great Jedi, is if you were to imagine that. I knew we were in good hands when Luke tosses the lightsaber. I really knew we were in good hands when Kylo Ren comes in with his dumbass mask and Snoke makes fun of it, and then in a fit of rage, Kylo Ren destroys the mask, and we literally never see it again.
Yeah.
That is some ballsy shit.
Yeah. And I just like that the thing I like about the Kylo Ren character is that he... it feels like if you stepped 2 feet to the left and reshot the movie, he would be the anti-hero main character. Not he's not. And it's one of the things that I have no idea what you do in episode 9, because he's not an antagonist. He's not a straight antagonist. He has antagonistic qualities in the plot. He's not the antagonist of this movie at all. He's one of the main characters. This movie has a lot of different protagonists, and he is one of the protagonists of the movie.
Oh, completely, yeah. And it's one of the things that I think makes the final stand on Crate, the planet, the red planet at the end, so compelling. He's there with the First Order, but as you say, he's still kind of taking a protagonist role in a weird way.
Yeah.
It's just very twisted by that point in the movie. But he's such a great character. So with him, we also, of course, have Snoke. A couple notes about Snoke. One, Snoke's throne room is one of the best sets in any Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
And the way they shoot it is even better. And it feels like an old school Hollywood set. Pre-Star Wars, 40s, 50s.
It feels like we just, Technicolor is a thing now.
Yep.
Let's put a lot of crazy color and shit because we can. It felt like that.
I love the red, circular background. I love his guards with the red masks. Those are cool.
All posing. They almost feel like Power Rangers villains or something, doing all these weird poses and shit.
Yep. And then, we'll talk about the fight that happens there, which is so good. But Snoke himself, I love Snoke in this movie because it is so self-conscious. And again, I do understand the argument that this movie might be a little too meta in some ways for people. Although I would argue it's so grounded in its own text. I think it's not like Joss Whedon meta or something. But Snoke, the movie is undercutting him in every scene.
Yes.
Like, Andy Serkis could totally play a great Star Wars bad guy. I think they're using Andy Serkis very knowingly here, in that he is playing kind of a parody of, like, the Emperor, because that's all Snoke is. And if you look at The Force Awakens, that's all Snoke ever could have been. Like, when I was watching The Last Jedi, and we had, some of these scenes where Snoke monologues about, evil and the dark side and power and all this stuff, and he's using his Force lightning and everything, and I was just like, okay, either we're going to do something crazy with Snoke, or we're building to an Episode 9 that's just a retread of Return of the Jedi, where it's like, how do we defeat this super, powerful being? And it's like, I don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
And so, of course, they dispense with him halfway through. But I kind of love every scene with him up to that point, because it's a surprise that they go through with it, like, because you wouldn't expect a big Hollywood movie to do that.
Yeah.
But it's not a surprise in terms of how the text builds it, because I think it's just not interested in Snoke, because Snoke's not interesting.
Yeah, and it's one of the places of, like, I think there is a big problem of that, like, that character just was never introduced. Like it's just, they didn't give the fucking character an introduction in Episode 7. He's just this weird hologram dude. And I think that's one of the reasons why people grasped onto that as a mystery. It is not because it was an active question that people were asking all the time, but it's like on a textual filmic level, there's no explanation for this guy at fucking all. It makes no sense.
He's like a more gnarly emperor.
But it makes no sense that someone like that could exist. That they're like, with the timeline of the movies, where the fuck did this dude come from? Where has he been? If he's this absurdly powerful, what the fuck has he been doing for 30 years? How does he know all this shit? How is he as powerful as he is? Like, it raises these massive questions about where the fuck did this character come from? Because we watched the other movies, we know that he wasn't in them. And
like the if you were really just doing like a straight continuation of Episode 6, it would be someone like a General Thrawn, who was like clearly like part of the Empire, even if we didn't see him before, who just rises through the ranks once the Emperor is gone.
Yeah.
And Snoke obviously was not part of the Empire.
Yeah, you could have made him something like that, but you needed a couple of lines of dialogue to set that up, because even like him being Supreme Commander Snoke, because I've seen some people online like refuting this criticism, being like, well, we didn't know the backstory of the Emperor, but you don't need the backstory of a character called the Emperor. He didn't even have a name in the original movies. We didn't even get Palpatine yet. Like, he was just called the Emperor. That's all the backstory you
and that
need.
was the only status quo we ever knew. Also,
exactly.
Was that there was an empire. We don't know where it came from. Big deal.
Yeah, he's the Emperor. He's the guy who leads the Empire. That is like the big antagonistic force in all three of these movies. That's the setup for that character. That character is set up effectively in those movies. Supreme Commander Snoke, like, that tells you nothing about this. Like, I guess he is the commander of the First Order, but what the First Order is as an organization is not particularly well defined in either of these movies. Yeah. The scope of the organization, the like ambitions and like objectives and motivations are not well defined, and he's just this weird dude who's there, and he's not even, if I remember correctly, he's not even physically in Episode 7. Nope. It's only holograms, right?
Yep.
Like, and that was one of my favorite things of that. Immediately they're like, no, he has to physically be there, even if it's a CGI character. Like, he has to be, like, the character in the context of, like, the universe of the film has to be in a place where he is physically there, or you cannot take this character seriously in any way.
It's, because this is the one area where I do think Episode 8 thumbs its nose at Episode 7.
Yeah.
Like, all the other things it does that are surprising off the back of Episode 7, I think are potential organic readings of that film.
Yes, I agree.
I think Snoke is very clearly, Rian Johnson said, that's lame. The most interesting thing I can do with this is not address his origins whatsoever, kill him halfway through, and just make people lose their minds.
Yeah,
and to
like,
me it works.
Let some comic book or expanded universe bullshit deal with this later.
Because I think it, you could have tried to answer everyone's questions about who Snoke is in this movie. I think it would be a much weaker movie. I think it's so much more effective when you just say, you know what? We're never going to learn anything about him. In the context of the story I am telling, he's not important. Kylo's going to kill him, and then we're going to have a whole third act after that.
Yeah.
And that's interesting to me.
Yeah, because they missed the boat on introducing the character in the first movie, there's no place to do it anymore.
Snoke, if I might make another JJ comparison.
Yeah.
Snoke in Episode 7 is basically the smoke monster in Season 1 of Lost.
Yes.
Like, they didn't know what it was. It's just a cool, evocative thing in the background. There was never probably going to be a fully satisfying answer for what it was. And guess what? There kind of wasn't. And then they put the smoke monster in the body of John Locke, and that's how it was cool in season 6. But like, spoilers for Lost. It's just 7 years, like 10 years old at this point. But anyway, like, that's kind of what it was. And I think Rian Johnson, to me, I think it's a very savvy move to do what they do here.
Yeah.
Because what it also does is it reaffirms where your actual investment is.
Yes.
Which is in Kylo Ren, Rey, to a lesser extent, like General Hux, who I think comes across as a really, like, not a deep character, but a fun character here.
He is a character, which I cannot say about the last movie. Like, I forgot that he was in the last one.
Yeah. So, all of that works for me. But we get to the scene where Rey comes to the fleet.
Yeah.
And she comes to Kylo Ren because she thinks she can turn him. And to an extent, she is right.
Yeah.
But it does not go the way she thinks, to quote
Mr.
Skywalker. And we get that amazing fucking scene in the throne room.
It's very good.
I mean, let's walk through. What were your reactions like watching that scene unfold?
I mean, I had, at that point, pretty much pegged that they were going to kill Snoke. Because I just couldn't see any other way for that to resolve. Like, there was no way to... There's no other way for that to go. Even because, again, like, this is very much a riff off of the scene between the Emperor, Luke, and Darth Vader from the end of Return of the Jedi. Like, it's framed in the exact same way. The characters are in the same position. Kylo Ren's Darth Vader. Rey is Luke. Snoke is the Emperor. And, like, down to the lightsaber being on the hilt of the armchair, that is a detail from that scene in Return of the Jedi. To the extent that I suspect that a 14-year-old Rian Johnson watching, like, his VHS of fucking Return of the Jedi had, like, saw this, like, why wouldn't you just do this? That's how you'd win, Luke. Like, why would you just whoop? Like, there you go. You've got the Force, buddy. Like, I fucking guarantee you, because he wrote the screenplay for the movie. I guarantee you that's where this idea came from.
But my whole thing is that, like, there is recognizing that, like, textually and thematically it should go that way,
yes,
and then actually seeing them go through with it, because a lot of Hollywood movies set themselves up for an interesting thematic thing that they then do not have the balls to go through with.
That's fair enough. But,
that's my point.
But for a movie that starts off with, like, the very evocative scene that everybody loved from the end of the last movie, and then just having Luke throw it off his shoulder and then walk away without saying anything.
Yeah.
This movie was going to fucking kill Supreme Commander Snoke. There's no other way for it to go. Because, again, like, back to Return of the Jedi, like, even that's how that scene ends in Return of the Jedi, is the Emperor dying. Like, there's no configuration for this to work other than that character dying. Like, I don't know any other way to do it. It's just, how is he killed and why? That's the question.
And it's so good.
It's so good. Like, the reasoning is great. The like, actualization is great. Like, and how it's all edited and put together dramatically.
I love
so fucking effective.
And it's such a good piece of writing, because Kylo Ren and Rey barely talk in that scene.
Yeah.
It's Andy Serkis monologuing. And this is what I was saying about Andy Serkis. Andy Serkis could do that kind of villain thing in his fucking sleep. He's such a good actor. And it hides a little bit until you catch on to it that what he's saying is fascist bullshit. Like, there is no intellectual depth to Snoke, because there is no intellectual depth to Snoke as a person.
Yeah.
And so he's going on and on about this, and he starts saying, like, you're wrong, Rey. I can feel Kylo Ren's resolve. His resolve is building. And then it's all these shots on Adam Driver where you realize what he's planning. Yeah. And he's, like, adjusting the lightsaber in the right way, and then with his other hand, he's manipulating the Force, and then it's like, and he will, and it just turns on, and not just like stabs Snoke, he gets cut in fucking half, and
crumples to the floor in a pile.
And like later on, there's like a close up of his like decaying rigor mortis corpse, just to make sure, like, no, JJ, you can't revive him for episode 9. He's dead.
Yeah,
I loved it. It's a great scene, and then of course, all right, Snoke's dead. Rey Force grabs the lightsaber. No, that's the best detail, is that he ignites the lightsaber and then Force brings it to him, and that's what cuts Snoke in half.
Yes, that's right.
That's a great detail. So they each have their lightsabers. No, at this point, in that whole scene, Kylo is fighting with the blue lightsaber, and Rey has the gnarly red one.
Yeah, I think they swap it. Yeah, they swap it back.
But then, like, that fight scene is something else.
Yeah, it's really good. Like, the one part of me that, and this is something where the movie's so overstuffed, there's no space to do this. I kind of wish that the guard characters had been set up earlier in the movie so that you understood, like, how strong they were, relatively speaking, because they're obviously, Return of the Jedi had these weird Imperial Guard dudes all dressed in red that looked really cool and didn't do anything in that movie because they were just there to look cool. And it's always been one of my things of, like, who the fuck were those people actually? I know that there's a billion novels that tells you exactly who all those people were, but, like, how strong are they? Like, how do they fight? Like, how does anybody fight a Jedi that if you don't have a lightsaber, don't have the training? And so I wish that there was something. I don't know. Again, I don't know how, and I definitely don't know where. I don't think this movie could have done it. But like, ideally, it would have been nice to have that set up a little bit better. But regardless of that, like small criticism, it's a fantastic fight scene. Like
it's because this movie has no traditional one-on-one lightsaber fight.
Yeah, the closest it gets is like a subversion of that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and so this movie I think finds a really cool new way to do a lightsaber action sequence.
Yeah,
and it's great because it's it really makes you feel the pressure, like whether you know what kind of threats they are beforehand or not, that when Kylo does this, they're going to have an uphill battle to get out of that fucking room. Yeah. And it's just stupendous. It's such a great scene, climaxing with he, stabs the dude in the chest and then raises the non-on lightsaber and just ignites it through the dude's face.
Yeah.
Just a lot of good stuff.
And it's just also from a like dramatic and storytelling point of view, I think it's really compelling to have Rey and Kylo Ren fight side by side, and it sets up interesting things for those characters. I think it pays off to the most interesting relationship to me in the movie, because I think like one of the things is that Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver have like really great chemistry with one another, and you get a little bit of them together in The Force Awakens, but not that much. You get like the one scene in the forest, and then like the middle point of the movie, and another scene in the snowy forest at the end of the movie.
Yeah,
but like they're always fighting.
A lot of forests in that movie.
Yes, there are. There's a lot of forests in Star Wars at some point. You've got a lot of forests, a lot of snow places, a lot of deserts. They've got kind of three settings they use a lot.
Not a flaw in Force Awakens.
No,
it's a flawed movie, but that's not one of them.
Yeah, that's fine. Like I don't give a shit but that's just a coincidence that both of those scenes were in forests.
Yes.
But it's really dramatically compelling to me to have those two characters fight together side by side, and that's it's just a really effective scene. Not just into the choreography and the action stuff is great, but just also, dramatically it's really good.
That red background there. Yeah. Oh my god. And I should say, like, at this point we're kind of isolating different subplots. This is also where the third act is building, where like everyone has come back together. Everything it's intercutting to is so compelling and good. But like staying with this for a second, because we're about like the movie's interrupted in a second by the thing Laura Dern does. We'll get there.
Right, yeah.
That was a good moment. But this scene where like they fight, they finish the fight, and then they have this conversation. And I love this scene, and I love where it goes. This is probably the linchpin of a lot of people's complaints though about the movie. Is one, people disappointed Rey isn't a Skywalker or something. Whatever. Yeah. But I love that, and I love how it's done, where it's they're talking and Kylo Ren, in this really understated way Adam Driver does it, of saying, no, say it, you know it. And he's not trying to torment her.
Yeah.
He's trying to get her to realize something, like, you know who they are, say it. And she just says the truth. They were nobody, they were junkers, they sold me and left me behind. I think to me, that's like, yes, thank God. Like, that gives Rey so much purpose to me.
Yeah.
And it also gives, like, this movie's whole thematic like underpinning of what the Force is so much purpose, and freeing it from any kind of dynastic legacy that, whether or not the movies do it, and I understand what you mean by that, in pop culture that is how it's viewed.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
You can't deny that, like, if you're making a movie, you kind of have to be aware of that.
Yeah, that's why I wanted like these movies originally to be completely disconnected, because I think like outside of the main movies, that's not ever a thing in Star Wars. Like, it never comes up that because Jedi aren't supposed to have kids, and Sith are obviously not that interested in sex. Like, that's not their thing really that much. They're not, or at least they're not interested in procreation. So it's not a thing that ever comes up outside of the movies. It's just this specific Skywalker thing that like is a weird detail that feels like is delivering a message that's actually like completely countermanded by the vast majority of the text of the movies.
Yeah. Although, again, I think if all your Star Wars knowledge is episodes 1 through 6, I think you can be forgiven for having that impression.
Sure, yeah.
But anyway, the movie does that, and then we have, Kylo Ren, outstretches his hand and offers, like, we can burn it all down, kill the past, and we can rule together. Now, I've seen some disappointment that she doesn't, like, take his hand and they form a pact. For me, that would be very out of character. And it's also like, it's thematically, I don't think it's a reset of the status quo. I think it's thematically important that they come together, they fight together, they have a heart-to-heart, and then there is this confrontation with the two of them, where again, this is Rey being tempted by this kind of nihilism of burn it all down and have no connections, and she has to choose not to do that. Because a lot of what Rey has been told in this movie, by Luke, by Kylo, by the world, is to take that offer, and she has to choose not to. On top of the fact that if she went with Kylo Ren, she would be letting Leia, Organa, and Poe and everyone fucking die, and no one seems to have an explanation for how they think that should go. But anyway.
Well, like, for me, like, I think because I'm kind of two minds about it, because I do generally like how the movie ends. Like, I have some issues with the climactic arc that we'll get to, but like, there is a part of me that does feel like the movie is building up to this idea, like I was saying, of that, like, get rid of the Jedi entirely, like down to, like, we don't even use that word anymore for these people because it's so loaded with baggage, like both in universe and out of universe, and that there's because there is something of, like, I honestly don't entirely understand why Kylo Ren has to go and kill the Resistance anymore. Like, I think I can see some of it for him, but I can definitely see an argument for that if the movie, like, ended with, like, Rey, like, joining Kylo Ren, and that's basically where it stopped in this, like, big dramatic, you know, Empire Strikes Back-esque cliffhanger of, like, where the fuck did, like, oh my god, like, that would set up something really interesting. I think there is an idea of, like, them trying to navigate this idea together of, like, how would they shape things? Like, what does that look? Because it is an open question of, like, what is Kylo Ren actually going to do? Like, if he kills, I feel like, because I've been watching the Peter Capaldi Doctor Who stuff, it feels like the Zygon inversion speech is like, and then once you've killed all the people, what are you going to do? Like, are the people going to, like, build houses? Is there going to be music? Are there going to be violins? Who's going to make the violins? It's like that idea of, like, what is your actual fucking, like, what are you actually going to do with that?
And I'll say, if I were making episode 9, I have no idea what JJ's plans are. If I were making episode 9, I would, one, have a significant time jump between the two movies, to allow for a new status quo, and I think it would be interesting to make it about a kind of resurgent rebellion and an empire that's falling of its own, like, lack of ideological, like, you know, strength in some way. Like, I think there's a lot of interesting directions you could take it from there, because Kylo Ren would be a very different leader figure than we've had in Star Wars before.
Yeah,
I think that's interesting. But
he would be completely incompetent as the leader of a large organization. Like, he's just really powerful, or, like, fairly powerful at the very least. He's more powerful than most people are. Yeah. And so he's in the situation where he can kind of just bully people and push them around. But I don't get any sense that, like, once at the end of this movie, like, once they've kind of lost that battle and he has to go back up into space, or I guess they didn't really lose that battle, but the battle sort of, like, came to a non-conclusion, and he goes back up into space, he can't command a fucking fleet. Nobody's going to follow him that's not on the ship that he can't just immediately threaten violently.
Yeah, and who knows what episode 9 will do. I do think there's dramatic meat on those bones to explore, but
I can definitely see that, like, there is a frustration of wanting the movie to end in this place where things are more gray than they are. That, like, Kylo Ren is more gray and Rey is more gray, and that, like, they're not quite, like, centered on this, like, light side of the Force, dark side of the Force idea that is always something that I think should be, like, heavily complicated in Star Wars, and in the best stories it is.
Yeah, and I do think I understand what you're saying, but I do think there's an interesting complication to it and, you know, I do understand how it can be overshadowed that the word Jedi is prominently used in the climax of the film. But I do think the idea that, you know, Rey as the closest we have to a main character in this film, is, you know, taking in all these life experiences, and we've identified these different things. And there is, I think, this fight within multiple characters for how much you believe in the worth of anything. And, you know, this ties into, I think what would be a good transition is to, like, the Poe, Leia, the fleet side of the story is also about this is, you know, are you just out there to fight and just, you know, burn things down and, like, destroy the
be a hero
and be a hero? Or is there an actual, like, you know, sanctity to life, a worth to having hope, and a value to living to fight another day that we can actually put our faith in? And it's kind of interesting because, you know, Leia, we get a great scene here where she is an active Force user, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But she's not, and still has not identified herself as a Jedi at any point. And she does seem to have, I think, a much more kind of nuanced view of what is good in the universe that I think the movie ultimately comes down on the side of, which is you don't have to label yourself as anything, but you fight and you try to save as many lives as you can, and you live to fight that next day. Yeah. And I think that's where, you know, Rey ultimately has to come down in this film, and that, you know, yes, it is very compelling to get to this point where maybe we're going to have this new union, but at the same point, I just think there is still something being challenged about Kylo Ren, you know, at his core not being able to, you know, see past that idea of just destroying things, because that's everything he believes in, quite literally.
I guess that's what I'm saying, of, like, the idea is that Rey would be able to see that in joining him, that she could create things. right?
Yeah.
That like because that is, I mean, that's what the dark side, light side concept is. Not just in the Force, but like more philosophically, is that you like life is not just creation. It's not just serenity and tranquility. It is also destruction. It's death. It's anger. It's those things. Like it is that complete picture. You know, like life doesn't exist without consuming other life. It's a like fundamental property of life as we understand it is that it needs to destroy and consume to propagate and exist. And like you need both of those things. They balance each other. And so I think there's something there of them. Like of them trying to sort of complete the other in an interesting way, which is something that they can maybe do in episode 9. But I do think there's something about the way that they frame it that feels a little bit too much like going back to the status quo of Rey just being on the good side and Kylo Ren being.
And I understand it worked completely for me, but I do understand that.
Yeah, like I'm not saying it's a big issue with the movie, but it's something that kind of has niggled with me after, because it was something I didn't really have a problem with in the moment. It's afterwards thinking about it that I kind of feel like the movie could have gone with a little bit more complicated ending for those characters.
No, and I get it. And I'm always just the kind of person who I just want to take kind of what the movie gives us and play on those terms. And on those terms it worked completely for me. But I do get where you and others who are more negative on that come from. Let's double back to kind of the beginning of the movie and the whole side of the film with, for lack of a term, like the Leia Poe kind of side of things. First off, Carrie Fisher. Let's devote a couple minutes to her. Because I think, you know, less flashy part of the movie, Carrie Fisher hit me as hard as Luke Skywalker did in this film.
Yeah, definitely.
I think she is tremendous. I think she's every bit as well written as Luke is in this. Every bit as you can feel the years on her. And like, you know, she has been fighting this fight forever. And just such a beautiful, wonderful, evocative character. And there were multiple moments where things Carrie Fisher was given to do or what the movie did with her made me tear up. And you know, it's not the movie intended to do that. This was all shot before she died.
Right, yeah.
But what a tribute to her I think this film is by accident, you know, not because they knew she was going to pass away, but just by respecting her as an actor and respecting her character and giving her, I think, a lot of cool things to do. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You know, because Carrie Fisher like had so little to do in The Force Awakens, which is not necessarily a fault of the movie. It can only have so many characters, but like you didn't really get a sense of what the performance was at this point. Here, though, like I really like that she just kind of has this. She's so sure of herself and her way of doing things that she doesn't even need to be like outspoken about it. She just is so kind of one with the world around her is a good way to describe it, I think. And I like her conflict with Poe early on in the film. I think the scene where she gets sucked out into space and then forces herself back in, that was a cool moment for Miss Carrie Fisher.
It's like so beautifully shot.
Yeah.
Like the one thing I wish that they had set up more directly that she could use the Force in that like very direct way, because it does, like, I don't have a big problem with it. There's like a bunch of people online that like that's one of the issues they have with like Star Wars canon or whatever, that like but it did make me raise an eyebrow of like, she can do that? And I think they could have done something small to like set up that idea, because it's nothing we've never seen that character ever do anything like that ever before in a way that like makes you understand that that's something that you could do.
Sure, but I also thought there was something interesting and powerful about it being just like, she just never feels the need to use the Force in that physical, tangible way until a moment like this where she literally has to.
Sure.
And other than that, like, she is much more one with the Force, if we want to say it that way, in that kind of religious, spiritual way where it's not, you know, they make a joke about it where Luke says, do you think the Force is just moving rocks and like doing stuff? And it's like, Leia lives the Force in a much more philosophical way in this movie. And then there's a scenario where, oh shit, the only way to get out of the vacuum of space here is to use the Force. So it worked for me, but I understand where you're coming from on that. But no, you know, they do kind of take her out of commission for the middle of the movie, which makes sense narratively for what they do with the Laura Dern character and everything. And then when she comes back in, I think she's got lots of great scenes. Her last scene with Luke, my God, that's a great scene.
Beautiful scene.
Yeah, up there with like the Yoda scene for me, just beautifully, perfectly done. And I do like the central conflict of the whole Poe through line of it, where Poe Dameron keeps trying to do the crazy flyboy shit that like Luke and Han once did. Yeah. And what's so interesting is that the movie really forces him to learn from that. Yeah. I have a couple little quibbles with some of the logic of what happens in the middle there.
Yeah, it's a little bit messy in a couple of spots.
But I can also overlook that enough because I think it has a purpose to what it's trying to do. And it is a critique of Star Wars in some ways, but also an evolution of Poe has to learn this lesson of like, there is so much more to being a hero than just being the cool flyboy. And by the time you get to the end of the film and they're at the base and he starts giving the speech that Laura Dern gave about how we're the spark that will light the flame that will burn the First Order to the ground, that hit me really hard because he'd gone through a journey to say those words. And in that moment, what he's preaching is not, let's go out there and be crazy and fight. It's, we need to make sure we preserve this to fight another day. And he had not been thinking in that way before. And it also helps that Oscar Isaac is an amazing actor.
Yeah, he's so good. He's got, like, the right kind of charm and charisma and physical presence that, like, even though I was pretty sure, like, pretty bought into early on that, like, okay, that's what his character arc is going to be. Because that's, like, the first character arc set up in the movie is that Poe is this hotshot that is probably making a lot of the wrong calls because he gets a lot of fucking people killed at the beginning of this movie to accomplish something that, like, in the scale of that battle is not that important.
He's really good at winning the battle and not good at winning the war.
Exactly. And so, like, and they keep on, like, iterating on that idea. And I think in many ways, like, despite there being, I agree, like, I think there's, like, some, like, weird character decision stuff with the Laura Dern thing in the middle of the movie. But overall, I think Poe has, like, this really strong, clear character arc. Like, there's a clarity to his journey across the movie of, like, from where he starts at the beginning and where he is at the end that is, like, remarkable to me. I think it's incredibly well scripted in that way of, like, from the dramatic structure of the movie. His character arc is really clear, really well defined, and really compelling.
Yep, absolutely. Also, he is awesome in any scene with BB-8. I love how much he loves that little robot. And even though they only have, like, 1 or 2 scenes together, John Boyega and Oscar Isaac still have the best sexual chemistry in these movies.
Yeah.
And they just let them be gay. Just do it, JJ. Just like, and it would even be kind of compelling of, like, Rose is maybe carrying a torch for Finn, and Finn has to say, like, I'm sorry, I love you, but not in that way. It would be very progressive, is all I'm saying. And very cool to see that, because those dudes need to fuck. That's all there is to it.
The one problem with that is I think Tumblr would melt itself to the ground.
That's very true.
I don't know if we as a species would survive.
Tumblr is more justified than usual on this one.
It's fair enough. Like, you're right. It's, like, criminal that they don't get to spend more screen time with each other.
You
like,
totally understand in, like, the context of the movie.
Yeah,
but,
it
like,
makes sense, but there's a part of you that's like, how come you couldn't have, like, found a way to scripted this so that they could have been paired for most of the movie?
Yeah.
Like, they're so good together. He's so good.
Yeah. No, that's one thing I don't want to lose sight of. This is, I think, the best acted Star Wars movie. Like, the sheer number of great actors in this fucking film, and that they all get good things to do. Like, well, we'll talk about Benicio del Toro, but, like, maybe other than him, like, even if I have some issues with things the Laura Dern character is made to do, Laura Dern's great in this. Everyone's great in this, It's but anyway, so let's talk about my one issue with the central part with Poe and the Laura Dern stuff. I like Laura Dern in this a lot. She rocks that purple hair.
Yes.
I think she's good and enigmatic in the right ways, and I think her final scenes are powerful and interesting.
Yeah.
That said, there's no logical justification for why she can't just tell Poe the plan.
Yeah.
And that's the one problem I have.
Yeah, it really stretches the limits of, like, believability at some point. Of, like, you got, like, because it would make sense if Poe was like in terms of his rank, was a normal fighter pilot. And it was like, he was more of a grunt. He was exceptional at what he did, but he was still, like, really low on the ranking rung. But in this movie, like, he's a commander at the beginning of the movie and gets, like, demoted to captain. That's still a high-ranking fucking officer. Presumably, like, I guess I don't know what the ranking structure is. If you associate that with what we understand ranking structures to be in our universe, that's a really fucking high rank. He's a high-ranking officer. He would have people under his command that he's responsible for. There's no fucking world in which you don't tell him the plan, because he's the guy that has to go tell, like, 50 other people what the plan is that are directly under his, like, responsibility.
Yeah, and, they're doing it to try to obviously, like, build up, like, oh, is Laura Dern evil or something? And I do think there is something effective about how strongly they pull the rug out from under you when it gets to, like, Leia comes in the, like, hospital nightgown and shoots Poe to try to defuse this whole thing. And I get that. I think you still could have gotten there more cleanly.
Yes, absolutely.
All you really need to do is give Laura Dern a motivation for why she wouldn't tell Poe. Like, we don't even need to know it at first. But, like, at some point where, like, there's some reason Laura Dern can't let other people know. And, like, she has to make this kind of hard, like, interpersonal sacrifice of being unpopular for the greater good. And there's no clear reason. Like, is there a security reason she can't do it?
Yeah.
Are they worried about a mole on the ship? Like, It's just it's kind of uncharacteristically messy in terms of logic compared to a lot of the rest of the movie.
Yeah, I agree. It's just like it's not the biggest issue in the world, but it's one that I think it's because the rest of the movie is so good on that level that it's really disappointing that also, one just like sort of slipped through the cracks.
And their plan is a good one. Like
yes,
Leia and Holdo's plan is very clever and very thematically appropriate, as we keep saying. And so it's just like it just is a little head scratching. That said, Laura Dern does then get to fly a ship at light speed through a fucking, like, Imperial fleet.
Yeah.
And that is one of the coolest things that has ever happened in Star Wars.
It's really fucking awesome, yeah.
That, and just like, how often is Star Wars honestly silent? Other than a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, Star Wars movies are loud and proud. And you get to that moment where she flies through, every inch of sound goes out, and you see those visuals, and they're almost like just the way they're framed and everything. They look almost like paintings. It's amazing, and you hear everyone in the theater verbally go, "Holy shit!"
Yeah. It's a great moment, and it's like with the Laura Dern and Poe, Laura Dern, whatever the character's name is in the
Holdo.
Holdo and Poe Dameron dynamic. It's like, even if some of that scripting stuff is a bit messy in terms of the character motivations, it is on a thematic level. It's a really good condensed version of what we're talking about, of like that generational gap and like trying to navigate this. Like, you need someone with the energy and enthusiasm and raw talent of and youth of a Poe Dameron, but you also need to find a way to like cultivate them into someone who's wiser, like the older commanding leaders who don't necessarily have the traits that they need like on their own. So they need, like, you need both sides. You need like this older, wiser figure, and you need this like hot young figure with all this energy and this passion, and you need to like navigate that complicated relationship. And I think thematically that part of the movie is really strong in that way. It just needed a couple of other passes in the scripting phase of figuring out the logic of how you could get those things to work together.
Yeah, something worth thinking about as we're going to talk about the next thing with Finn and Rose and their subplot is I wonder if, when you're making a movie in like 2 or 2.5 years, which is what Rian Johnson had here, is what JJ had on his movie, what he's going to have on his next movie. Just in general, that's kind of the time frame these movies for Star Wars or Marvel or anyone is made on now. I don't know if you can ever fully like press out a lot of these issues. It's very rare you get a movie made on that kind of time scale that is kind of as good and like completely irons out all of these issues, because it's hard to do. Like, Mad Max Fury Road, George Miller had 20 years to figure that thing out. And so by the time he made it, it was a perfect script. That is a super rare thing in Hollywood. And I would just say, like, I would love to, The Last Jedi is, I think, a really, really damn good movie in its current form. I would still also kind of love to see the version where Rian Johnson had another year to work on the script or something.
Absolutely.
Because even in the small amount of time he had, a lot more accomplished than most big Hollywood blockbusters these days.
Because it's a complicated fucking thing that he's given.
Yes.
Like, of having to, take up what was not his movie, not his screenplay, not his ideas. He did not, as far as I know, he was not involved in any way in the making of The Force Awakens. And so he has to take up all of that, take up other people's characters and other people's setting and figure out what to do with that. And then he's saddled with not one main character, not 2 main characters, not 3 main characters, not 4 main characters. Arguably, if you count Luke as main character, which I would, 5 main characters of this movie. You have Luke, Poe, Finn, Rey, and Kylo Ren. That's 5 fucking main characters that you have to put together. That's a crazy fucking task to do.
And I think it's amazingly accomplished for what it is.
Absolutely. The fact that only one of those branches is weak, in my opinion, is incredible to me.
Yeah. And that's all I'm saying is that I think it's a current trend in Hollywood that you see a lot these days. Like most Marvel movies we talk about, for instance, even if we like 90% of them, they have some thread that's not entirely working.
Some weird thing that it does.
Yeah, like Thor Ragnarok mostly worked for me, but I also think Thor gets a little slow in the middle and things like that. So this just happens, and it's part of, I think, their grind, and it does show who has the skills for it when you can make it in that condensed amount of time.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's talk about the Finn side of things. And it's a weird thing because I love John Boyega. I think Kelly Marie Tran is great, new find as Rose, and I think their chemistry is interesting and different. I love BB-8 through this whole side of the movie. I think BB-8's a great droid character. There's a lot of fun stuff. I love the visual designs on the planet they go to. There's a lot of interesting character things that happen, and I like where they are moved to by the end of the movie.
Yes,
but,
yeah. Like they're like that's one of my favorite parts of the climactic action scene is the Finn and Rose stuff.
Yeah, and even their stuff when they get onto the Imperial or the First Order ship, and like their fight with Phasma, that's really good too. But like, it's just you start feeling it as soon as they have the little Maz Kanata scene where, again, and I kind of like it. Maz is kind of a fun little character, but like, it feels like they're really kind of working hard to get these characters off on another adventure. And like, you do have to turn off a certain logical side of your brain of like, how do they get away from the fleet? And how far away is the casino planet?
Yeah.
And how do they, all of that. And it just feels like it has to work. You can feel kind of the script feels labored there to get them on that adventure. And then whenever it cuts to them, it feels just a little too disconnected, even though there are relevant themes being furthered there about the Force belonging to everyone and that, the haves and have-nots in this world. And again, I think it's if anything, it's a failure of, not a failure of, but like a problem that arises from ambition of wanting to say so many things with your movie. And it's like, that's great. You have lots of good ideas. Maybe say a few fewer things so that the things that are there can stand out even more purely, is what I would say. And I also don't think the Benicio del Toro character is necessary.
Yeah, it's just something of like, it feels like the entire subplot exists because we have 5 main characters. Like, if you didn't have to address Finn, like, there's a part of me that kind of just wishes that Finn, as much as I love John Boyega, and I think he's great, I think he was awesome in Force Awakens, like, his stuff near the beginning of that movie is some of my favorite stuff in Episode 7. But, like, he's not necessary to this movie. And, like, you could cover a lot of the thematic material that his subplot covers with Rey or Poe in another section of the movie. You could have found another way to do it. I would put it like to spend more time with Rey and Luke, because I think that's one area of the movie that like it ends up feeling like they're together for like 2 days, which is not enough. Like, I wish that there was a more sense of more time spent with those characters together to give a sense that Rey has trained and learned more from Luke at some point. But yeah, like there's other places in the movie where you could put these ideas and not have to just go through so much mechanical maneuvering in the plot to like get these characters, like pair up these characters together and get these characters off and get them to this other planet and establish all this shit on this other planet and come up with this weird MacGuffin of having to get this code breaker to get onto the ship that is ultimately not necessary and in fact ultimately is like against what they're trying to do because it hurts. It's like there's so much plot shit that has to go in to deliver what is a really simple but like elegant thing about, I think, like that is important of addressing like more directly that the Force is about everyone, that the like objectives of the resistance or the rebellion is more than just resisting against the First Order, but like also like those themes get like hampered because there's not enough time to actually deal with those themes, because then you have to go and meet the Benicio del Toro character and go on this big chase with all these like space horses and then go up in like the shuttle. It's like there's so much shit you have to do for like not enough game, and it's honestly it's something I would have cut out of the movie.
Yeah, and it's hard again, as you say, because you he literally can't cut Finn out of the movie. It's just not an option for Rian Johnson making the Disney Star Wars movie. But like, yeah, so I liked it well enough, and again, I think most importantly, it does come back around, and everything recompresses for the end of the film and works for me, and has a very good through line in the third act. But yeah, in the middle section of the movie, it feels kind of longer than it actually is and longer than it needs to be because of that. But I did like the casino planet. I thought it was a cool visual design. I like in the John Williams score, they quote the Cantina theme from New Hope in there, which is fun. The Master Codebreaker, they think they're going to get the guy in the white tuxedo is Justin Theroux.
Oh, yes, that's right.
And if you've seen season 3 of The Leftovers, I'll just say there's... maybe I should just spoil it because it's so funny. Can I spoil a little Leftovers thing for you?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Like, I'm probably not going to remember it.
Okay. The Leftovers has multiple episodes that take place in like a dream purgatory land. Okay. And in one of those, Justin Theroux is has been cast in this weird like metaphysical reality as the president of the United States, and he has to like get into this bunker, and the way they have him get into the bunker is they scan his penis. And
I was going, before you started telling this, I was going to ask you, does it have anything to do with anybody's penis? Because every time you talk about the show, it's all about someone's dick.
Everyone shows their dick on the leftovers, and so
Even people who don't have them.
and there's even this really funny thing where when he puts his dick on the tray, like they put in this, like Damon Lindelof put in a very big thud sound effect, and all I could think when we saw the Codebreaker, and I knew I was right because the famed TV critic Alan Sepinwall wrote this same thing in his review, is like, wait, is Star Wars about to go somewhere really weird with this? With like, is that the Master Codebreaker? Is he's gonna slap his dick on the First Order's thing?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I call it the Master Codebreaker, but
I'm sorry if I spoiled the leftovers, but none of you watched that show anyway, and I couldn't explain why that was funny if I didn't get into it. So
yeah, no,
that was funny. But anyway, and I thought again, I love all the creatures in this. I like the cool horse things that they free and have a big chase on. That's all fun. But you always are you have that nagging sense of like, this feels distracting.
Yeah, like, and especially because it's like, I'm like so desperate to get more stuff with Luke and Rey, because that's the most interesting part of the movie to me, is Luke, Rey, and Kylo Ren. And again, I think there's more stuff that they could have done with those characters, because it is another one of the issues of the movie of it feeling small to me, is that like everything that's happened since the beginning of episode 7 has been over the course of like a week or something. Like it's absurd. Like, I wish that there was more of a time gap somewhere, like in the way that the original movies had, that gives you the sense of like, okay, Luke has grown between movies, and you can feel that, and you get a lot of like character development and training stuff. Like a lot of like plot things can happen off screen that get characters into the position you need them to be. And I just wish we could have spent more time with Luke and Rey instead of like
and I get it,
cutting back to the Benicio del Toro character and that stuff.
And I get it, and sadly, Rian Johnson did not have the option to put a lot of time in between episodes 7 and 8, given how 7 ends. But 9 should be, I feel like it should be like 5-10 years later.
I hope they do.
It would be cool. But
before we move on, one thing about the Benicio del Toro character that I'm thinking of, that like tying into, I think one of the reasons why myself and a lot of people have that like thing with Rey and Kylo Ren, and like wishing there was more of this like, oh, we're moving to this more sort of like morally ambiguous place with these characters instead of them resetting their position, actually kind of comes from the Benicio del Toro stuff, because that's his whole thing in the movie, is he, I think, introduces that theme and develops that theme more than the movie can pay off. That like he's bringing up these ideas of like, oh, like who owns this ship, like, and like what were they doing? Oh, they were selling these weapons to the First Order and the Resistance, and then like it's like complicated, but like the movie doesn't. That's not one of the main themes of the movie, and when you get to the end, the movie doesn't feel like it says anything about that. Like, no, that's one of the themes that doesn't enter the climactic act.
I agree with that completely, and I do think that's why I think the Benicio del Toro character is the most unnecessary element of the movie. It is cool to see Benicio del Toro in space. Yes. It's a fun dude.
I think there's room for him in the next movie if they want to bring him back to actually do something with that character.
Yeah, but like that is a theme for a different movie, because also like, you can say the thing of like, they sell weapons to both sides. In the text of this movie, they are manifestly different things. Like, okay, maybe they buy their weapons from the same people, but the Resistance is manifestly different from what we see than the First Order. Like, you can't really introduce that question in a movie that, I don't think the movie is black and white in its morality, but it is still like, the First Order is very evil and self-consciously so.
Yeah.
Before we move on to like the last act of the movie, which has so much good stuff to break down, including, as we said, the 2 most badass things in Star Wars. We'll get to them. I want to mention General Hux, because I don't know where else we're going to mention him.
Yeah.
I love Domhnall Gleeson in this movie, and I love they make a specific choice that I think is something that is there in Force Awakens, but the movie is not fully aware of, and also like just the time was not fully there.
Yeah, again, I don't even remember his character.
And I think Rian Johnson zeroes in on it, which is that the First Order is kind of like American fascists today, in that they really idolize all these evil people from the past, and they're really shitty at doing it. Like, I love that like Hux is kind of like a bad fascist. Like, he's kind of incompetent, he's loud, and he likes giving the speeches, and as soon as you push him in any direction, he just kind of crumbles. And I think that's funny, and I also think it feels more weirdly topical than Star Wars tends to be.
Yeah. Like, one thing I do think is that, like, some of the jokes in the movie work for me, but I think there's too much. Like, I think sometimes, and like some of that's attached to that Hux character, not all of it, but there is a tendency to do a very Marvel movie thing of like, undercut and like and sort of like append a dramatic moment with a dumb one-liner or like a goofy visual gag. And for Marvel movies, that generally works really well, because I think there's a tone difference. There's a huge tone difference between what most Marvel movies are doing and like the sanctimonious hokiness of Star Wars that I love. Like that's the Star Wars tone. The Last Jedi is generally very, very good at that tone, and I think some of the humor just doesn't work for me that well.
Okay.
And some of that is related to that Hux character.
Yeah, and humor is a very subjective thing, obviously.
Yeah.
It worked for me, but I did notice, like, there's more of this than you'd usually get in Star Wars.
Like, even, like, the prequels, like that's one of the things people bring up with the prequels all the time, but generally, like, that's not something that the prequels actually did that much.
Well, the prequels also...
Like, was Jar Jar...
The prequels are utterly humorless, except for specific characters who are, like, cut off from the rest of the cast.
to try to be the comic relief characters, And this one, like, there's just a bit of it that feels like a... And maybe part of it is also, like, off of the back of... Because, I watched this... I don't remember... Because you probably watched it after the Disney 21st Century Fox thing. Like, that was before you saw, right? Like, there's something about that. I was like, oh, God, is this what every movie is going to be? Like, I'm fine with it in the Marvel movies. I can't have this be every fucking movie does these jokes this way. This kind of, like, twee humor. I can't do that. I can't live in that world.
Still did it better than Justice League.
Well, yes. It did it better than Justice League because they were trying to do it when they started making the movie. But
because it does literally everything better than Justice League.
Yes.
Because it's not hard to do things better than Justice League. All right. The third act of the movie is so interesting to me because it kind of feels like 2/3 acts.
It kind of feels like there's a fourth act to the movie, basically.
And it didn't, like, it's different. It ultimately didn't bother me because I enjoyed all the content.
Me neither. I think it works.
Yeah, but, like, you have all the stuff that's building where everyone is coming back to the center, where, like, you have the Poe, Laura Dern, like, General Organa action over here, and then, Finn and Rose have come back to the main ship, and they get captured, and they're being interrogated by Captain Phasma. And, Rey and Kylo Ren are there in the throne room with Snoke. All of this is, like, going on at the same time.
Yeah.
And then it all kind of... And the movie does do a very good job of building disparate, like, plot threads to, like, simultaneous climaxes, which is a difficult editorial thing. I think it pulls off really well.
Yeah.
But so you have, like, at the moment that Rey and Kylo Ren are fighting over the lightsaber, that's when Laura Dern crashes the ship through, and everything goes to shit. And also an interesting, bold move, that lightsaber is just split in half and destroyed.
Thank God. Like, that's, like, one of the things that it feels like... I don't think that Episode 7 was setting up that that's what they were going to do with that lightsaber, but that's absolutely what they need to do is, like, get rid of that fucking thing.
My brother had a cool comment that, like, when Rey is looking at the pieces at the end of the movie, the specific thing you see is the crystal.
Yeah.
That is something cool you could do, is, like, show her take that crystal and make a new saber out of it.
Yes,
that would be a
lightsaber.
That would be a cool way to honor the legacy of it, rather than just literally she has it again.
Yeah, because also, like, there's two things of, like, one, it's like you're bogging down your movie with all the Skywalker thing. It's three things, because it's that, like, bogging down your thing with all the Skywalker thing. Second, how do you get that lightsaber back? It's still insane to me.
Off of Bespin, right?
Yes, off of because again, like, for people who have forgotten, that lightsaber was Anakin's lightsaber that then Obi-Wan cut up Anakin, took that lightsaber, gave it to Luke. Then Luke has it up to the end of Episode 5, where his Darth Vader cuts his fucking hand off on a gas giant planet called Bespin, and his hand with the lightsaber goes falling into basically Jupiter. It's like, how the fuck do you get that back? So that's the second thing.
That will be the topic, the plot of Rian Johnson's upcoming Star Wars trilogy.
Exactly.
All three movies.
We can only hope. The third thing is, and this is, like, maybe the least important, but in some ways to me the most important, we need new lightsaber designs. Like, it's really boring to have your new main character, this new trilogy, have the same fucking lightsaber as the dude from the prequel, as one of the dudes from the prequel trilogy, is Anakin. Luckily, Obi-Wan had a different lightsaber. He gets a new lightsaber in Episode 3 that is his lightsaber from Episode 4. But, like, I'm a nerdy Star Wars dude. I like all the different, like, lightsaber designs. Yep. I think they're cool. I think when they're done well, they say something about the character. Like, Luke's green lightsaber is awesome. I love that fucking design and all that shit. Like, Rey needs to have her own lightsaber. And it was, like, fine for a little bit, but she definitely needs to have her own lightsaber at some point.
Absolutely. So anyway, that's cool, but where were we? So anyway, all this stuff, comes to a head and everything explodes. And then it's all about kind of, like, getting everyone away and down to that planet. Within here, I do love the escape scene with Finn and Rose against Captain Phasma, and I think that's a very cool fight they have. And then one of my favorite shots in the movie is as Phasma is like falling to her death. Like, you have the one, they break the helmet a little bit so you can see Gwendolyn Christie's eye. She's a Game of Thrones actress, so that's,
Game of Thrones lady.
Yes. And she says, "You were always scum, FN," whatever his number is.
Yeah.
And there's that low angle on John Boyega with everything exploding behind him, and he just goes, "Rebel scum." That's a great shot.
Yeah.
It almost makes all the labored execution of plot worth it to get to that point, because that deserves to be a GIF all over the internet. It's great.
I really hope that they bring the Phasma character back in the next movie with no real explanation and have her be easily dispatched by a character that probably shouldn't be able to defeat her, but they do anyways.
She's the Boba Fett of these movies, and it's great.
But it's like the self-conscious Boba Fett, because Boba Fett was Boba Fett by coincidence.
Yes.
Now it's like a weird archetype or something.
Anyway, I think it's fun. And then, all right, everyone is flying down to that planet. I actually, because I had no sense of how long this movie... I knew going in it was 150 minutes.
Yeah.
I didn't know where we were in the film. Like, there were a couple of moments, like, on the way down to the planet called Crate, which I learned after the movie, where I thought the movie was like...
They say it in the movie, by the way.
Where I thought the movie was about to end in kind of like a, Pyrrhic victory kind of thing, where, like, we don't see the last battle, but, like, they're going to go keep fighting. And it doesn't. We get down to the planet. That's where it kind of feels like the fourth act starts to me.
Yeah.
I really like how it starts tying things together here. That's where we get the fulfillment of Poe's arc. And Rey comes back in the Millennium Falcon, and we'll talk about what Luke does in a minute here. But Crate, as a planet, is one of the best planets in live-action Star Wars.
Yeah,
I
awesome.
fucking love that design with the salt over the red Earth and how they use that, and, like, the landscapes. Like, there are images from that planet just burned into my retinas that are so powerful and awesome.
I mean, it's just because this movie is very good at subverting a lot of, like, the, classic Star Wars tropes, and, like, we just saw that with killing Snoke and all that shit. And this is just, like, visually a cool subversion of the Hoth scene, which is obviously, like, that's the most probably recognizable action sequence in Star Wars. It's incredibly iconic, and I love that. Just like at first it looks kind of like Hoth because you have all the white, but it's like it's very flat and it looks different. And then that first guy sort of steps out there, and I was like, is he bleeding? Like, what the fuck is that? And it's like, oh, that's just like what's underneath the crust.
And it's so
red dust.
And there is obviously CGI involved in all this. It looks so tangible. It doesn't look like a prequel planet where everyone's on a blue screen. It looks like they at least built a lot of that out, and it's done in camera.
Yeah.
And that's really, really cool. And then I love the whole action sequence we get here where they, again, like, one of the things I like about the skeleton of this movie is it is all about a tactical retreat. Like, we just have to get away, and then we have to get away from that, and, like, just enough until we can finally get away from these guys. And I like that it just keeps pushing it and pushing it to its limits, where now it's like Leia has these contacts on the outer rim, she sent the beacon out, and they just have to hope for a miracle, but until then they have to fight to preserve what they have. And so they all go out there in these really shitty little, broken-ass fighter things, which are also perfect for that planet because they're making these red streaks in the salt. Another just, I think, terrific action scene.
Yeah,
definitely. Obviously it is quoting Hoth in some ways, but it doesn't feel like an empty recreation of that Hoth battle scene. It's its own great battle scene. And I also like the fulfillment of the Finn and Rose arc here.
Yes.
Where, Finn also learns kind of a lesson similar to, or is made to learn it here but it's also a fulfillment, I should say, of Finn's arc throughout both of these movies, where Finn starts as the guy who just wants to run away from this horrible life he's been thrust into, and by the end of Force Awakens, he has something to go back and fight for, and here, he still has that instinct of, like, getting away is everything, and by the end, he's willing to do this suicide run. But it's also Rose. I think we have built her to a point where we would recognize, like, she is smart and, like, empathetic enough to realize, like, no, dummy, that won't achieve anything.
Yeah.
And two, like, we need you. That would be a real loss. Like, it's almost, I'm fine with her kissing him at the end. Like, that's a nice little, grace note. Because you don't even have to read that romantically the way it's done. Yeah. But, like, even if you took that out completely, it's just that they're friends and, that would be a very dumb, worthless kamikaze thing.
Yeah.
So I like all that.
I think it's a really good moment. It does sort of suffer from, I think, like, that of the main characters, I think Finn's character arc is the most loosely sketched. And it's, like, so heavily reliant on episode 7 that, like, it took me a while to remember that, like, okay, right, I guess, like, he hadn't quite fully bought into being like part of the Resistance. He was more just a friend with Rey, I guess was where he was at. And I think like that stuff's slightly messy, like with all of this stuff. But I do think it ends on a really strong note.
Yeah, and again, John Boyega is so good in this.
Yeah, definitely.
And Kelly Marie Tran, who's in all those scenes too. So that's great. But okay, main event.
Yes.
Main event. Sean. Luke Skywalker in this movie astrally projects through the universe.
Yep.
Has baits Kylo Ren into throwing all his cannon fire at him. Survives because he's a force projection. Dusts off his shoulder on the robe. Badass thing number one, because we don't know he's astrally projected yet. Badass thing number two, he astrally projected across the universe.
Yes.
Sean, that blew my fucking mind.
It's so... Because one of the things that happens is because the last time we saw Luke was that, like, Yoda scene and, like, this sense of, like, okay, he's gonna come back.
We're waiting, like, through all of this.
We know that he's going to come back. We know that he's going to come back and help Rey. This is going to be a thing. And for a while, like, in the Snoke scene, that's one of the things I kept on waiting. Like, that's one of the ways that this could play out. Is, like, Luke shows up here and, like, throws a big wrench in this shit. And just, like... And I knew he was just going to appear out of nowhere because he has to just sort of manifest somewhere. Like, I didn't quite know there was going to be as literal before it started happening. But yeah, he just shows up at the Rebel base, like everyone sees him, he goes and talks to Leia for a second, and then, but they do a really good job of like visually setting up that like, because he looks very different, like he looks younger, like because he basically looks the way he looks in the flashback to when he attacks Kylo Ren. Like his beard is more like shorn, and his there's not as much white, it's more sort of like brown.
I didn't catch that when I was watching it. I've heard everyone else has pointed it out, and I think I was just like so consumed in the moment because there's a lot going on at this point. Obviously,
he's also wearing his full black Return of the Jedi getup, which is a great detail. But then the other thing is that he has, again, as someone who I pay a lot of attention to the lightsaber designs, he had the Anakin Luke lightsaber.
Yes, and I noticed
it was destroyed.
Yeah, that is the one thing I noticed.
Yeah.
I also love how they foreground it of like just how hopeless the situation gets. Like the First Order has blown through the big door. Even Leia is starting to feel hopeless. Like maybe their hope has run out. And then Luke just appears. And the way it's actually done in the Luke Leia scene, which again, so beautiful. Love every line there. And very poignant knowing that's also one of the last significant moments for Carrie Fisher.
Right, yeah.
Is I thought for a little while before he actually stepped out and everyone saw him that it was another like force conversation moment, kind of like we had with
I could see that,
Rey and Kylo of like, that was my first thought is he's not really here, it's a force projection. But you could not have predicted how far they would take that idea. So no, but that's a beautiful scene. And then he steps out and baits Kylo Ren down there.
Well, and it's just the whole way it's framed, because part of it is like the culmination. It's such a smart culmination to the themes of the movie of that, because so much of the movie is telling you like, your heroes are not who you thought they were. Like this like legacy of this older generation is way more complicated and way more messy than you think it is. And these people that you've heard about and you've idolized your whole life are not that. Like, and that's I guess it's not the first second of the movie because you have the space battle, but it's the first second of Luke on screen is that. Like, he throws it away. This is not what Luke's referring to when he said this is not going to go the way you think, but that's one of the notable lines from the trailer, and that was like Rian Johnson signaling this movie's not going to go the way you think if you're thinking that it's going to just like idolize these characters, kind of in the way that a lot of The Force Awakens sort of did. It's like, no, it's not that. This is like, these characters have evolved, and they're gross, and they're real, and they're like human, and Luke makes mistakes, but he is a hero. Like, he is like he's human. He's also the dude who defeated the Emperor. He's also the dude who converted Darth Vader. He's also the guy who went and like risked life and literally risked limb to go save his friends on Cloud City, and risked like a cool lightsaber. And like, he's that guy. He is this hero figure, even if he's aged and he's become grumpy and all this stuff. So that moment where he finally decides to come back, and he has like just some of the most brilliant shots of the movie, like accompanied with the editing and the music in particular, because this is also where that song from the trailer that's like bum 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 bum, like that sting starts happening as he's marching out in front of these doors alone to this whole line of AT-ATs staring him down. Like, how far has this dude come from Hoth when he had to be like in the back of a fucking like speeder thingy, like, and try to shoot them down? Like, he's just stepping out there on his own.
Yeah, no, it's John Williams, who we have not talked about enough yet, fully engaged. Like, my brother, who is, again, he's a composer, and he thinks about music a lot, and obviously idolizes John Williams, as we all damn well should.
Yeah.
he's talked about how for Force Awakens and especially The Last Jedi, like John Williams is not phoning this in.
No, yeah.
And he's not even just doing a good job. It feels like John Williams is thinking about his own legacy, and he knows these could be some of the last scores he's writing, and he is pouring heart and soul into them. I think these are sonically and orchestrally on par with his 70s and 80s work.
Absolutely.
Especially The Last Jedi. Like, I have the soundtrack, and if you listen to the tracks from the Luke Kylo Ren scenes at the end, oh my god, like you were talking about, it's amazing. The cinematography there, those are the moments that, like, I just close my eyes in the days after seeing this movie, and I see those images of Luke and Kylo Ren framed against that planet, and just the sheer scale of it. Like, I saw this on my favorite theater, which is it's the biggest screen in Colorado, and, you know, just Rian Johnson makes such great use of the big, wide frame in a way that most directors don't even think about anymore, and widescreen photography is often so boring to me. This makes full use of that, and yeah, it's just like... And because it has interrogated Luke as an icon, when it puts him in an iconic position, it has so much more weight, you know?
Yeah. And just like when Kylo Ren is just like, fire everything at that man, and just like all of them start shooting at him, and that was where I started to sort of piece together that's probably a forced projection, because it's also, I think it's like set up smartly a little bit by having Yoda be there earlier, and like the Kylo Ren and Rey communication scenes sort of like set, like put this idea in your mind that like this is something that could be done. Yeah, and then like this massive explosion, and it's so anime as fuck, but it's like, you know, it's every single Dragon Ball fight scene is like launch the biggest Kamehameha in the world at whoever it is, and then like all this dust is like I finally defeated, and then like turn around, and then like the wind blows, and it's like and then you turn around, and it's like he's still standing there, and brushes the thing
I
off
believe
his shoulder.
that's literally a thing that happens with Cell at some point in the series.
Yes, it's everything.
Yeah, no.
It's forever, because it's just beautiful. Like it might as well been like they might as well like when Luke's projection and Kylo Ren been fighting, then have Kylo Ren go to stab Luke, and then Luke like disappears in front of his eyes. It's like, where'd he go? It's like,
I thought you were gonna say like do the thing where like the background becomes like purple, and then he's like, and he looks back, and like it's a solid color now.
But it's just that, it's just the thing of like, you know, so like this opponent dodges so quickly you can't even see where they went.
Yep.
Where's he? It's like, you know, like it's so anime as fuck, but it's so perfect. Yeah, and then Kylo Ren goes down to go confront Luke, and that's where like then like, and you just like get to see him so well with like okay, yeah, he's dressed up, he got a haircut, he trimmed his beard up, he put on his good clothes, like he looks like surprisingly really fit also.
Yep.
Yeah, and then he breaks out the blue lightsaber, and then I think I'm pretty sure that he doesn't actually like make like their lightsabers. I don't think ever make contact.
It's not a lightsaber fight.
Because he keeps on dodging, and there's that great sort of shot of him just like going like basically doing the super limbo underneath Kylo Ren's swipe. Yeah, and it's just all he's doing is buying for time.
Yeah,
it's so good.
Because that's also like he's being the icon for the other main theme of the movie, which is like do what you can to get all these people away and live to build that hope another day.
Yeah, and then also like he's not like yes, he's very smart and he's very powerful in some ways, but he's also just tricking Kylo Ren. Like he's not a Superman, really. Like he's just kind of smart, and he's powerful enough with the Force to do this thing, but he's more playing on Kylo Ren's insecurities and being clever about it, more than actually being like this superhero figure that steps out and is able to defeat this entire army with like one hand tied behind his back, because nobody can do that.
Two thoughts. I also love that, you know, within all this, Luke does get the big climax scene here. Rey still has a big role to play, and I like that it's, you know, freeing all the people from the rocks, like with the Force, and that ties into, that gives a good place to cut when, you know, Luke has the line about "I will not be the last Jedi," and it feels like that's the appropriate way to like frame like Rey being a hero over here while Luke is a hero over here.
Yeah,
I like.
One thing I like, a little criticism I have for that is that like I think it mostly works, but I do kind of feel like Rey gets a bit lost in this last battle scene. Like what she did, like she does have a place, and it's a great shot of her like lifting all the rocks with the Force and everyone coming out and being like, oh my god. But like it feels like she sort of recedes, I think, a bit too far into the background for who's supposed to be like presumably like our main character, especially going into the next movie.
Yeah, no, and I understand, and there's a lot going on, but it all works so well. It's just you get swept up in it.
Yeah, and then that when the music swells and then it cuts to Luke back on his island where he really is and meditating, and that's where, like, you know, what you probably are suspecting has been what's going on, but like the full confirmation, just like how it's shot is like so fucking perfect.
Well, let's talk about that in a second.
Okay.
I did two other things I wanted to talk about is, you know, in that line, the Last Jedi title drop that they exchange. I think I can understand, like, you know, some of the thematic particulars we could get into. I think in the moment it's a great back and forth dialogue, because it also comes back a little bit to a much more lighthearted exchange Luke and Rey have earlier on about, like, literally everything you just said is wrong, and he, like, tears her down. And he does that to Kylo Ren here. And just, like, because, like, that's where the music swells, you see Rey raising the rocks, then it cuts back to Luke being the astral projection, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a great, and it feels to me like an organic moment. I don't think that this movie was written as Star Wars The Last Jedi and then he found a place to drop the title into. I think they made the fucking movie, saw that scene, and said that's the title of the film.
Sure,
because it was heavily rumored in production this movie was going to be called Fall of the Resistance, which would also be fine and appropriate.
That'd be an okay. That sounds more like a Star Wars novel or something to me
it
than
does.
the movie. But.
It totally feels to me, though, like that was a line that... Because I think if you were just doing a title drop, it wouldn't feel that clean to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, Thomas and I were actually joking before the movie started, because we had a lot of time, like, in line and between Force Awakens and Last Jedi of, like, you know, Star Wars doesn't actually do title drops, like, in its films. Like, there's no one ever says, like... we will have Star Wars now, or anything like that. Or like, you know, the Emperor to Darth Vader in Episode 5 doesn't say, they may have striked us, but now the Empire strikes back. Like, they never do that.
It's like Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn don't encounter, like, Darth Maul, like, who are you? I am the Phantom Menace.
Yes, right. So, like, when that moment came in the movie, and Kylo Ren has the line about, you will be the last Jedi, I went to Thomas and went, and then, like, Luke says, and we went, oh. Like, it was this really, like, special moment between the two of us. I loved that. But yeah, holy fuck, Sean, the moment when it cuts back to Ankh-To, and he is meditating, and, you know, you see, that's when you realize, oh, right, he was projecting a younger body, all of that, and, like, the exhaustion, like, he lets go in that moment because he was doing this amazing, miraculous thing. And especially my favorite detail is he sees the binary sunset.
Yeah.
And John Williams brings the music back in, and that's what he disappears against. I'll admit, in the moment, I didn't even read it as death. It was just he became one with the Force, and now he's gone. And it's such a beautiful moment, because it doesn't feel... exactly like, you know, like Han Solo dying in Episode 7, where he's stabbed and falls off a thing. It feels more mystical and powerful than that, you know? And he dies this legend, and he didn't even have to leave that island to do this amazing thing. I mean, what a fucking moment.
Yeah, because it's like thinking about some of the setting up of this scene is also, I love... like thinking about it, because, you know, he does the thing with the, like, literally every word you said in that sentence was wrong, but then also... like, in one of the earlier scenes with Rey, they directly set up the idea of him walking out alone in front of, like, the whole First Order, where he says, like, what do you think I'm going to do? Walk in front of the entire First Order with a laser sword? It's like, that's what he did. That's just, he just found a way to do it. But yeah, like, there's part of me, like, wishes that Luke didn't die, because there's, like, because I do think there's something about his character arc that's not quite finished of, like, because he never, like, properly gets to become a teacher. Like, he, like... you know, he fails in his teaching of Kylo Ren, and I think it's one of the issues of, like, he never really gets to teach Rey anything. Like, even, like, I think, like, he never even gets to that third lesson, which is presumably something that's going to happen with him as a Force Ghost. I'm sure he's going to be as a Force Ghost in the next one. But I do wish that, like, I think it'd be really fucking hard. I think it's, like... they did an amazing job of finding a way to get Luke Skywalker in this movie and not have him completely overshadow every single character, like 99% of the movie. Like Mark Hamill's performance, and then that character himself as a protagonist is so overwhelming in so many ways. But there is I wish they could have found some way to leave a door open for him being still kind of alive, and then like have a like spin-off movie or something with Luke.
That's why I still just, to me, it. You know, again, it's not he gets shot and we see the corpse. It's...
right, but he does, like if he comes back, he has to be a Force Ghost. Like, sure. I don't see any way that he can be, like, corporally in the world again.
Yeah. But and some of it is, it just aesthetically works so fucking well.
It does, yeah.
I understand, you know, and Rian Johnson, I read an interesting interview where he said he really struggled with that moment, and just like he felt like it kind of called to him when he was writing that scene, that's how it had to go. And I get it, because I do understand the instinctual, just, this feels right. And I don't know, it's it's a great ending to this movie. I do understand what you're saying.
Because
but it's also like,
I think it can work both ways.
Yeah.
Like I'm curious, and a lot of it does depend on what they do going forward.
It's
with
also
that
just
choice.
like, for a character like Luke Skywalker, who is so larger than life, and we've been waiting to see again for 40 years now, that they got so much of it not only right but perfect.
Yeah.
And there's this one thing that we don't even dislike. We're just talking
it's
about.
more like they did it so well that like it feels like a shame to kill the character.
Sure, yeah.
Is kind of part of where I'm at. Like I'm basically fine with this being how he bows out, but there's also part of me that like can see going forward, like Luke being like a small part of this, of like in the corner, like sort of like sorting things out and like advising Rey, but not being like maybe like this force projection or whatever made it so it's like he can't be quite as an active part anymore. Like I think there is room to do something else without killing him, but I think killing him is fine.
Yeah. So the movie then has what I would call a Return of the King style ending, where it has, like, it could totally have ended on the binary sunset shot.
Yeah.
It could totally end with them getting off the planet. There's a great shot where everyone is together in the Millennium Falcon, and it seems to me like it's referencing the end of Return of the Jedi, with all the people, like, kind of in a line together.
Yeah.
And Leia has a great final line there about, this is what it feels like, basically, to have a rebellion like this. And I love that sense of, like, everyone's in the Falcon heading towards a new tomorrow. And then you could also have the final shot being them going to hyperspace, light speed. But then it does have this interesting little epilogue back on the casino planet with the kid who force picks up the broom and sees the rebellion going off, and he has the ring. And it worked for me. I
really like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think and honestly, I think it's the best thing that casino sequence allows to happen is that little like coda.
Because it feels like a really personal thing for Rian Johnson of like, because in some ways it does feel like the movie has to do everything it does to build to that little coda and finish us off there, because that does tie together almost all the disparate themes. Again, maybe not the Benicio del Toro stuff.
Yeah.
It ties all the disparate themes into this little moment, and it feels like, if anything, like that's the thing Rian Johnson made the movie for, to some degree.
Yeah.
There's a reason why it's not like a post-credits scene or something. He wanted it there, and it's so different. No other Star Wars movie ends like that.
Yeah.
So, my overall reaction when I saw it, and the more I think about it, is that this movie is so good, and so is its own big, beautiful thing, even in its occasional messiness.
Yeah.
Like, if I were Disney, I'd just delay Episode 9 a couple years, and I'd say, it'll be popular whenever we release it. We can make other Star Wars movies. We can make that Obi-Wan movie, and let's just breathe after this, I would not have J.J. Abrams do the next one.
Yeah.
That seems insane to me, and I'm not even saying I'm not saying I dislike J.J. Abrams, but that's not what you hire him for.
Yeah.
To come back together and end all this, and who knows, maybe he has a side of him we haven't seen, and he could totally make a good movie, and I don't want to stack the deck against him, but it just does feel like whoever would have directed The Force Awakens, and no matter how good it was, where Rian Johnson takes things, you either need Rian Johnson to do Episode 9 or someone completely new.
Yeah.
And who can once again come in and completely innovate. That's my biggest disappointment, is that no matter how good Episode 9 is, it's literally going to be a step back because you're going back to the previous filmmaker.
Yeah.
And and The Last Jedi, I think, shows such a cool, beautiful vision of new people making Star Wars.
Yeah, it's just like The Last Jedi has such a strong core sense of identity and self, and is so good at expressing it. Like the only issues are like these little messy quibbles that we can have, but like they're so not a part of like the core of the film that it's not a big deal to me that it has those issues. But it is definitely, especially as someone who didn't like Episode 7 that much, like it is especially disappointing to think about like episode like J.J. Abrams coming back for Episode 9, but then also like Rian Johnson did not leave any room. Like, I mean, there is, you have Rey, you have Kylo Ren, like, there's things you can do, but, like, when I left the movie, I was, like doing an experiment in my head of, like, trying to brainstorm for myself, what do you do as a sequel to this movie to wrap up that? I have no fucking idea.
But that's why it shouldn't be.
No idea what you do.
That's why it needs to be someone new, because it
Yeah.
has to be someone like Rian Johnson who would come in and say, I have a story I want to tell with these characters,
Yeah.
and here's where I want to tell it to. That's what you need, and JJ is too invested in having set this thing up, I think, So I don't know. I think there's a lot of things you could do that could be great, but I think you need someone who can really think outside the box. So again, don't want to completely stack the deck against it. But even that said, one of the other things I kept thinking about is no matter what happens in episode 9, again, episode 8 is so its own island, it won't affect my enjoyment of this movie.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I'm excited. I also them writing Rian Johnson a blank check to make whatever Star Wars thing he wants, he fucking earned it.
Yeah.
And
like that's again, like that should have just always been what it was. Like just like let him do his own thing. I'm excited for that.
I'm sorry, I'll let you say it in a second. I would just love to be in the pitch meeting with like Disney executives where he explained the end of this movie and the astral projection. Like, what does Luke do? He actually, it becomes one with the Force and actually projects across the. What are you talking about? Like that, unless you could like show it visually, that must sound crazy to like a suit in a boardroom. Anyway, sorry, what were you gonna say?
Like one question I do have is, like, this is Star Wars. You can do whatever you want. Like, you can set up a love triangle between Luke, Han, and Leia, and then in your third movie reveal that Luke and Leia are actually siblings. Like, that's what this franchise is. You can do that. Is there any way that J.J. Abrams just decides, you know what, Rian Johnson, you said fuck me on some of that stuff? Well, fuck you. Snoke didn't really die. That wasn't really Snoke. This is really Snoke. And like you said, Rey's parents were nobody. What if maybe their dad was Obi-Wan Kenobi? What if that's a thing?
I have seen jokes about that. The best one being someone made an opening scroll for episode 9 where it just starts with, "It was all a dream." And it's like, Snoke is planning to like whatever.
Yeah.
The only thing I will say that I think would prevent that is Kathleen Kennedy being the consistent storyteller between these movies, who probably would demand that the stories that they have told be respected. But like, who knows? J.J. Abrams is a powerful guy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think we'll see. Star Wars, Sean, are you happy to have a new Star Wars movie that you really like?
Yes. Like, it's been a harrowing time in some ways as a Star Wars fan of like, and there's still something, because part of the problem though is that like, it's awesome that this movie is so its own thing, and that means it's like I can enjoy it on its own, but it also means that it in no way fixes the larger problems about like new Star Wars.
You don't think this is going to ensure a good Han Solo movie?
No, and like, and it's also just like, going back to, like, I think the setting for these new movies fucking sucks. And, like, I am not particularly interested in seeing what happens to the First Order, because I don't understand what the First Order is. I don't... And it's one of the things I've also, like, with the Finn subplot of, like, I like that, like, we're dealing with some of, like the class issues in the Star Wars universe. Like, that's always been a thing about Star Wars. That's, like, Anakin's backstory is he's literally a slave. Like, that's always been a thing here. But part of the thing that in the back of my head that, like, didn't really make sense is, like, the First Order, as far as they understand, has nothing to do with this. Like, this is not as a consequence of the First Order. This is not, they don't have control of this planet. This is not some class difference that is imposed because of their fascist rule. Like, because I don't know what the ruling governing force in the galaxy is anymore, and I don't understand if that's something that this rebellion is actually rebelling against in any way. Are they rebelling against something because to rebel against something you need to be like the subordinated group, not the dominating group? And so it's like a lot of those ideas of the setting of these new Star Wars movies are so elusive and non-defined and boring to me when they are defined that, like, I think this movie is awesome. And I think some of the honestly, my biggest issues with the movie are owing to that setting stuff being really shitty and inheriting that shitty setting from episode 7. That I hope that when Rian Johnson gets to make his own trilogy, that it is like way in the future or way in the past and is utterly disconnected from all of this. Like
Knights of the Old Republic adaptation.
Yeah, I mean, like Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2 are my favorite Star Wars things. Like, and I think that's the best setting in some ways they've had because it's so removed and they can tell whatever story they want in that setting. Do that for the movies because you have no idea how liberating it is to have Star Wars that is that free and is so removed from this baggage. And it's always been the video games and the comic books and the novels that have had that. It's like, let the fucking movies have it for once.
All right. So we are getting too long here. We're going to cut it off for now. We got to talk about a good Star Wars movie today. That's awesome. That's just a fun way to end the year. We will be back on Thursday for our last show of the year, though. with our top 10 video games
Yeah.
of 2017, which has been one of the best years we've ever gotten to cover for video games.
Absolutely.
This is going to be a lot of fun. We will see you guys then. What are our last words?
And maybe, maybe we'll talk a lot about Star Wars Battlefront 2. That's maybe that's number 1, right, Jonathan? Great year for Star Wars in every respect.